Sylvia, are you ready?
Ready, Mayor.
Okay. Welcome to our regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. I'll now call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. For the audience tonight, I'm the Mayor and serve as presiding officer for tonight's meeting. Tonight's public meeting will be conducted utilizing Zoom video communications. This allows the city to conduct essential business and comply with public health administration recommendations to protect the public and city employees to practice social distancing and limit exposure by not allowing in-person public meeting. To ensure that the public will be able to participate in our meeting, public comments can be submitted as live comments during Zoom meetings and via email at publiccomments@cityofglendora.org. A brief lineup tonight, we have 2 special items, 1 public hearing, 4 consent calendar items, 2 unfinished business items, and 2 new business items. So I would like to start off our meeting this evening by recognizing this month as Women's History Month, by highlighting amazing women who have made a difference in history, particularly by recognizing our accomplished professional women that have helped lead our city as Glendora's city council members and mayor. Sue Bauer, Lois Shade, Judy Nelson, and our own Karen Davis. Thank you very much for your service. It's greatly appreciated. Madam Deputy City Clerk, can you please conduct a roll call?
Let's see. Yes, thank you, Mayor. At this time, I would like to conduct an oral roll call and request that council members respond with present when their name is called. Councilmember Thompson.
Present.
Councilmember Friedendahl. You're muted.
Thank you. Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyer.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis.
Present.
And Mayor Alawas.
Present.
All council members are present. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Elvia. This now brings us to the invocation of the pledge. We'll have the invocation by Pastor Hillary Chrisley of the United Methodist Church. Hello, Pastor.
Good evening, Mayor. Let us pray. God of the ages, we gather for the city council meeting very keenly aware of time. We will mark the end of daylight savings, and time will in a sense change for us. So gracious God, you have unwaveringly walked with us through all things to meet this milestone of 1 year of COVID safety protocols, and time has in a sense changed for us again. So we want to thank you that you are not bound by time as we might be, and we ask that your limitless, infinite guidance and grace envelop our city council's proceedings tonight. We need your sacred sense of timing to slow us down, to ponder all who are affected by our decisions, and to quicken us to action where your urgency calls us to make a difference. We give you our city, our leaders, our neighbors, as we trust in your timeless love for us all. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Gary, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure. If you can, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Gary. This brings us to our special items. The reopening of the economy update. I'd like to invite our city manager, Mr. Adam Raymond, to give the update.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. As we do every week, we'll give a COVID update. Next slide, Elvia, please. So this update says one council update. It's actually the 17th council update since we started these in April 2020, including a special meeting that we had about some county provisions. And this will provide an update from the last meeting, which was February 23rd. Next slide, Elvia. So as we're all aware, the state has a blueprint for a safer economy reopening protocol. It's a tiered system based on color As we started this in August of 2020, an emergency brake was pulled due to increasing infections in both November, and further pulled on that emergency brake in December when a regional approach was implemented based on ICU capacity. Next slide, please. As hospitalizations began to improve, the county returned to the regional from a regional approach to a tiered approach, and LA County is currently in the purple tier. However, as we'll see later on in the presentation, these statistics released today shows LA County exceeding the requirements to move to a red tier, and we'll talk about some other changes moving forward. But in essence, LA County is doing better than all of its surrounding counties. Next slide, please. In February of 2021, the state made some changes, as it has now, to the tiers, and where a lot of confusion is occurring out in the public is the tiered systems and allowances have begun to shift based on infections. The state allowed TK through 6 to return statewide when infections hit 25,000 per 100 new cases per 100,000 residents. The state also allowed some additional youth sports to occur when the purple tier, when counties hit 14 new cases per day with 100,000 residents. Both of those thresholds were met in February. Next slide, Elvia. The state has recently announced some new changes for March of 2021. In addition to allowing for some professional sports, we'll talk a little bit about the shifting in tiers. The state has set 2 thresholds for at-risk population groups based on basically your zip code of 2 million and 4 million doses. When the first 2 million doses to these at-risk communities are issued, changes are going to be made to the infection rate levels allowed to move from purple to red. So the changes will be in the red to purple change. I mean, the purple to red transition. When 4 million doses are issued in those communities, changes will be made to the orange and yellow tiers. Based on the current rates and the revised changes of 4 million, LA County would actually qualify to move all the way to orange. LA County has let us know that they believe, according to the state's data, that this 2 million, the 2 million dosage mark will be reached by the end of this week, meaning the revised factors will go into place within 48 hours. It is completely possible that when we are about this time next week that LA County will be in the red tier, which allows for additional education and school reopenings, TK all the way through 12. Next slide, please. So here's currently what the tiered system looks like. You have case rates per day based on 100,000 residents. Then you have positivity rates. There are 2 different positivity rates that we take into consideration. One is the overall positivity rate, and the second is what is called a health equity metric, which essentially measures infection rates among your most at-risk communities, and that varies by county. Next slide, please. So this is information that was shared by LA County yesterday, and what this shows is once we hit, if you read it going from top to bottom, the second row going down is the current case rates that we just showed, just based on infections per 100,000 residents a day. The third row down is what happens when 2 million doses are administered. You'll note that the purple tier transition to the red tier is anything less than 10 cases per 100,000 residents. When 4 million are administered, we begin to see changes then to the orange and yellow tiers, where if we pay attention to the orange tier specifically, if new case rates get below 5.9 per 100,000 residents a day, then counties can shift into that area. So Elvia, with that, next slide, please. According to the information released this morning, and we've included a comparison to LA County and other counties, LA County's adjusted case rate per 100,000 residents is 5.2. So once we hit that 4 million threshold, even if case rates stay the same, LA County will likely move all the way to orange tier. We're currently in purple. Not only that does this trigger additional allowances in schools, but also triggers additional allowances in restaurants, inside dining. Of course, LA County has to agree to some of these, but LA County, based on their press conference yesterday, has signaled that they are going to change a lot of what they do to mirror the state's reopening protocols. And so there is a very good chance within the next month that LA County sees many, many additional freedoms and reopenings across the economic spectrum. Next slide, please. Here's a quick look at the map that was released today. It is, we believe, within the next week, you will see a lot of red and orange and yellow on this map. Next slide, please. So really quick recap of the county. The county's health order is called Safer at Work and in the Community. They've made changes in November and December to account for the increasing infections, and then also the reversal to allow more economic reopenings in January and February. We learned yesterday that they're gearing up for additional changes. Next slide, Elvia, in March and April. Specifically, as we look at TK through 12 education will be first, and some additional outdoor and professional sports. For some details, Elvia, next slide. So here we see what the state has released for outdoor sports and live concerts and theme parks. Within a month, based on the current trends and based on vaccinations increasing dramatically in areas that are at risk, it's possible that we will for sure be in the red, if not the orange tier. And as you can see, some of these changes are pretty significant, especially for areas hit with theme parks, such as Anaheim, whose economic impacts are mind-numbingly large. So while not a return to normal, there is a lot of progress here as we start looking at some of these additional allowances in less than a month. Next slide, Elvia. As you likely saw in an update on your phone, or I talked about, the CDC released some guidance for fully vaccinated individuals, which are considered those who have received a second dose and have waited 2 weeks for Moderna and Pfizer, and 2 weeks after the 1 dose from Johnson & Johnson. Essentially, those fully vaccinated can meet indoors without masks, and they can meet indoors with one non-family member at a time. LA County has told us, based on this information, this is a slide from their presentation last night, that they believe the state and county will amend their guidance if they have not already. We haven't had a chance to check early this evening to see, but we do believe in LA County and at the state level, private gatherings and other gatherings will be greatly modified based on the information provided under fully vaccinated individuals from the CDC yesterday morning. Next slide, please. So in our local schools, we're happy to report that the TK through 6 was allowed in February when infections came down, and grades 7 through 12 will be allowed in the red tier. Glendora Unified School District began in-person instruction, and this is for general in-person, not the at-risk groups that were previously allowed. Began in March and will continue to roll out as grades go through April. And Charter Oak Unified will begin a progressive reopening of TK through 12 through April. I think it's important to note that previous to this, school districts were allowed to apply for waivers as they related to certain groups that were at risk, certain students with special learning needs and those with English language challenges. Glendora Unified opened its doors as soon as they could to those groups as well. So there has been students in school in Glendora in varying capacities for many months now. Next slide, Elvia. So just a quick reminder to everyone, the city of Glendora, as always, must follow those rules by the county and the state of California. If the state sets the ceiling, the county sets the floor. The city could set additional restrictions in the basement, and to date, we have not done so. Next slide, please. City facilities, some upcoming changes. The police station, transportation station are now open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for walk-in service. The police station will move from Monday to Saturday starting March 15th. The City Hall is currently in person Tuesday through Thursday, 8 a.m. through 5 p.m. Additionally, in April, we will move to a Monday through Thursday reopening as childcare continues to be a challenge. Fridays and Mondays continue to be difficult, but we'll be able to rearrange staffing for at least normal business on Mondays through Thursdays beginning in April. For library services, the computer lab is open Tuesdays through Thursdays. The Plaza Discovery Space on the area outside the Bidwell Forum on Wednesdays at varied times. And I would just add the staff's also looking at various approaches to reopen the library at certain capacity levels, which we're pretty excited about. And as always, staff is available Monday through Friday, and then extended hours through phone, email, video chat, you name it. If you need something, we'll make an appointment for you to come in and get the information that you need. Elvia, next slide, please. As is, I'm sure, the case, vaccine information continues to be really confusing. Who's eligible, where you can get an appointment. We really urge you to visit these websites. Call us if you have questions. We will do our absolute best. The eligibility lists continue to change on a regular basis. We are currently working with our employees who are eligible and even writing letters on their behalf. If you have an employer and you qualify, we ask that you work with your employer, who will be more than happy if you want to get a vaccine. And if all else fails, please call us at the city and we will definitely try to point you in the right direction and give you all the information we can. Next slide, please. And as always, you can find information at these websites. Of note, the city's website, cityofglendora.org/COVID-19 continues to be one of our top websites in the city. It was always jobs, pay my water bill, PD, call log history, but it's COVID-19 of late. So please visit those websites if you have any questions, and always call us if you need anything. And Elvia, with that, next slide. And Mayor, we'll turn it back over to you for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Adam. As of this morning, I received some emails saying that the county might go and open up restaurants to 25% capacity this weekend. Is there any truth to that rumor?
So the state would have to allow that first, but if the county thinks that the state was going to reach their 2 million vaccines and within 48 hours we move into the red tier, the red tier does have some allowances for in-person dining indoors. So we have not heard anything official yet, but that said, I have not personally been able to take a look at the most recent pronouncements past 2 p.m. this afternoon. So if anything has changed since then, we'll definitely find out and release that information like we always do through our social media accounts as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adam. This brings us to item number 2 of our special items, a briefing from the City of Glendora's Disaster Council. I asked for this item to be placed on our agenda as a special item to help inform the public of what has been happening behind the scenes for this last year as it relates to managing the COVID-19 pandemic. Disaster Council is comprised of our community leaders, schools, fire, police, Chamber of Commerce, hospitals, and county health to help inform and guide us as we move through and as we move forward in and also through the pandemic. I'd like to invite our city manager, Adam Raymond, to give an update and a background on this disaster council, because most folks are completely unaware that this is happening behind the scenes.
Thank you, Mayor. So the city of Glendora is a little unique where we have a disaster council. It's a provision in our municipal code. And when the city declared an emergency for COVID, it's hard to believe we announced the disaster after the state, federal, and county did on March 17th. That decision was ratified by the council on March 24th. And our municipal code provides a section for a disaster council. And the intent is exactly as you said, is to bring leaders that are impacted in those various areas together to meet and discuss information for the betterment of the entire community. The council at the March 24th meeting decided for this specific emergency, because of how broad it was, to not only include the mandated individuals of the mayor, city manager, police chief, and public works director, and other related staff, but also to include Charter Oak Unified, Glendora Unified, Citrus College, Emanate Health, LA County Fire, LA County Department of Public Health, and our Chamber of Commerce. We met between 1 and 3 times every month since for the last year. We've met more than 20 times. Information shared a lot of the time is where we found at the start PPE to reopenings to putting people in contact with people at the health department to get questions answered, to understanding testing, to being able to provide robust updates at the city council, and the mayor, as mayor, whoever the mayor is chair of this committee. It's hard to believe that Judy Nelson was actually the chair of the very first meeting when this group was formed after the emergency was called on March 17th. And you have taken it over since then, and this will end when our emergency is over, which hopefully is sooner than later. So we do have some individuals this evening, Mayor, who appear to be on the call that are from the Disaster Council. I see Dr. De Leon on the call. I see Allison and several other staff that are there. It is a lot of work. We really, really appreciate everyone making time to do it, and turn it back over for you just to provide an update if you'd like, and ask any additional questions.
Thank you, Adam. Would any of the folks on the Disaster Council like to say something? I mean, we really greatly appreciate your involvement in this. I know it does take a lot of time to prepare and move schedules around to do this. It's usually at 1 o'clock on every other Monday, and it does take an awful lot of your time, but we greatly appreciate this to help all of us move forward. Do we have anyone that would like to, from the Disaster Council, like to say something?
I would, Mayor Alawos.
Go ahead, Penny.
Hello, members of the City Council. Thank you for having us tonight. I just want to thank the city for inviting the schools onto the Disaster Council. The information that we receive when we meet is really important as we plan, understanding what's happening with the emergency services, all of the offers of PPE that have come through the Disaster Council, always keeping updated on everything that's going on in the city, which helps inform how we proceed as a school district, has been extremely helpful. And I have found that it's been very supportive to have the Disaster Council as one of the groups that I'm able to attend. So I do appreciate being invited to be part of that. It's really a great council. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your participation. We really greatly appreciate it. It takes all of us to move us forward. Anyone else? Adam, is there anyone else that, on here that would like to?
I know the chief and I know Allison are on here, but I'm sure you'll hear from them unless they have anything to say later.
I know how much they love it when I call on them.
But I mean, just a huge thank you. And a lot of the information that we have and are able to share with the community comes from a lot of the conversations that we have in those groups. The Department of Public Health, I don't see our contact on here, but you know, for a lot of the back and forth we get, you know, they have been actually incredibly helpful. Noel, who is our point of contact, has been, you know, a lifesaver for many of us in providing some of the challenges. So it is one of those times when areas, you know, that serve the public are all together. And hopefully, I know Joe's on this call as well. I don't know if Joe wants to say anything, Mayor, from the chamber's perspective, but I know from a public safety perspective and a business perspective, it was probably helpful to get a lot of those questions answered, especially at the beginning of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Joe, your mic is on mute. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, no, you know, first off, you know, thank you for inviting the chamber to that council. You know, it is a lot of help to our business community having that firsthand communication with everything that happened this past year. You know, we all know it changed, you know, minute by minute. So being able to be part of the conversation was very valuable, and I truly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And I'd be remiss in thanking Adam for his participation. Usually we start off the meetings with Adam's briefing, and his briefings are superb. He usually informs everyone else, and then we might have some little tweaks here and there, but usually Adam is ahead of even the county health when he gives his report. And then we go back to county health for some little additional questions. But usually Adam is the head chief on that, which gives all that information out and it gets disseminated and we get a little bit of reverberation back. But thank you, Adam, for doing that and for actually being the head of that council. I appreciate it greatly. So with that, we're going to move on to the public comment period. I'll now open up public comment period. I would like to invite members of the public to address the city council. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, speaking once on both on and off agenda items. This is your time to speak uninterrupted. Please address your comments to me, the presiding officer. Public comment is limited to 30 minutes. If you wish to request to speak, select the raise hand icon in Zoom before the close of the public comment period. You'll then be called upon when it's your turn to speak. LB, do we have any public comments received?
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we do have with us this evening Cameron Griffin, who is the new district representative for Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio in the 48th district, and he is here to introduce himself. If we can have him unmute, Cameron.
Yeah, I think you guys can all hear me. Thank you so much, Avia. I think I met a couple of you guys in different meetings before, but I just wanted to let the rest of the council know who I might have not met so far. My name is Cameron Griffin. I will be representing Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio instead of Taylor from now on. So if you guys need anything from me at all or anything from our office, please reach out to me. I will also be sending all the council members an email just to let you guys know my contact info. But if anyone, Glendora residents, need to contact the state for any reason, you can reach out to my email, which is Cameron, CAMERON, .Griffin, GRIFFIN @asm.ca.gov. And that's all I had. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you, Cameron. You're muted, Elvia.
Sorry. Kate Hamilton.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor Alalos and City Council members. I am Kate Hamilton, and I've been a resident of Glendora for 21 years. I am here tonight to express my disagreement with Mayor Alawos's efforts at the February 23rd City Council meeting for a letter to be sent to Sacramento as Glendora's official position to oppose SB 29, the Act to Extend Universal Vote by Mail. For the LA County Clerk's Office, 28,300 ballots were cast in Glendora in the last election. The difference between the number who voted for Trump versus Biden is a mere 154 votes. Thus, Mayor Alalos, Glendora is pretty equally balanced on both sides of the political spectrum. This is why I disagree that the official stance of the city would be to oppose SB 29. For the first time ever, our nation did not have a peaceful transition of power, and it was all predicated on President Trump's continued claims of mass fraud in the election. Mayor Alalos, I believe your effort on February 23rd is just a perpetuation of this false claim. President Trump has not been able to substantiate any of his claims in courts across the country, and instead, time and time again, confirmation of the validity of the election has been recorded. There were several other people and issues on the ballot, and no one is questioning the validity of the results in any of these other races. If the results for president are fraudulent, then all these other races are fraudulent too. I voted in person, but earlier than election day. My husband put his ballot in a drop box. My brother and my dad mailed in their ballots. All of us appreciated the various options that were available to us to vote. David Friedendahl, you bring up the issue of requiring a photo ID. What ID do you accept? You may be assuming that everyone has one. When my mother-in-law gave up driving a few years ago, she didn't think about the need to renew her driver's license as she wasn't driving anymore. What she didn't consider was that she now no longer had a valid non-expired ID. It was quite an effort for my husband to get all the documents together to reinstate her ID. How often does this happen to other seniors? Or what about those who have never had a driver's license? So again, what ID do you accept? Voting is a civil right, and I believe the city's stance and effort should be to ensure that everyone is able to cast a ballot instead of putting up barriers that ultimately restrict that right. The more valid question should be, why didn't everyone vote in the last election, and what can be done to rectify that? I thank you for your time and consideration of my remarks.
Thank you, Kate. Elvia?
So Joe Cena, did you have an update for us?
Yeah, yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Alva, City Council, City staff for allowing me to speak tonight. Again, my name is Joe Cena. I'm the presidency of the Glendora Chamber of Commerce. As previously mentioned, there's a lot of changes coming up, so the chamber we'll be helping to disseminate that information to our businesses so they're prepared as efficiently as possible, because we know all this stuff is just going to all of a sudden happen. So we look forward to continuing that communication to make sure everybody knows what they can and can't do. We have a couple of events coming up. Just wanted to quickly feature. We have the Gold Line speaking at our next luncheon mixer without a lunch. That's what I call it, since we don't serve lunches over Zoom. This Thursday at 11:30. If someone's interested in that, they can RSVP on our website. And then also coming up on March 31st at 6:30 p.m., we're going to be hosting the 2021 State of the Schools Zoom webinar. This is an opportunity for the community to hear from Dr. Perry from Citrus College, Dr. De Leon from Glendora Unified, and Dr. Jordan from Charter Oak Unified on all the updates happening at school. And as we know, there's a lot of them and they're coming fast. So the community is welcome to RSVP for that at glendorastateoftheschools.com. These seats are limited, so you want to grab yours as soon as possible. But we have several hundred, so don't worry about that. But glendorastateoftheschools.com. With that, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to work with the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. We've got Luis Schmidt from AFSCME. Luis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Alamos, members of the City Council. Calling in regards to item number 11 on tonight's agenda. And I just wanted to, I see Chief Egan. I want to congratulate him on his appointment to being chief. It's my first time seeing him since in a while, but so congratulations to you on that. But again, item number 11, this wouldn't have been possible without the leadership of you, Mayor Alamos, and the City Council. If you guys had not hired, City Manager Raymond, I don't think we would have been here today. But because you guys made that wise decision, several years ago, we were able to work together on this item, which will help the city attract employees and keep talented staff that the city had been losing. And so I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank the council for hiring City Manager Raymond, but also for the work that he's done to make sure that he puts people in places where they can actually lead the city and address employment issues that come up. And this was one vital issue that because the city took it head on and addressed it, the city will stop losing talented staff to other agencies. The city had been a revolving door where the city hires water staff, but then they train them and spend a lot of money on them to get trained, and then they go to other agencies. But now with this item, once it's approved, it'll help the city stay more competitive, and it'll help us attract new talent, and while keeping the residents, providing them clean drinking water and safe drinking water and reliable water too. So I just wanted to say thank you to the city once again, City Manager, and most importantly to the HR staff who are the ones doing all the work behind the scenes to make sure that items like this are possible, and that we continue to work together to address the needs of the community and also balance it out with addressing the needs of the staff. So I just wanted to say thank you and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Do we have anyone else that wishes to speak in public comment?
At this time, there is no one else via the Zoom or email that's been received.
Thank you, Elvia. So I'll close the public comment period, and I'll bring it to reports and statements, inviting the council if they have to report anything out from. So Mendel, you want to start us off?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And yes, I will. The Gold Line is doing some great things. If you haven't been down Glendora Avenue, I would urge you to drive down there. Now, drive slow because it's very smooth and they've taken out a little bump. So you might see a little bit more speed than what you think. But I really appreciate, we all do appreciate the outstanding work that the goal line did in getting that done, and it looks great. And just wanted you all to know that in case you haven't been down that street, it is open. Also wanted to give you a brief update. A couple of meetings ago, we had a very long exchange about some of the district stuff, the city stuff that is going on with the fields and the MOUs and all of that kind of stuff. I'm very pleased to state that Gary and I were, at the district board last night. We were welcome there, and we both thanked them for allowing us to come. We came there to just simply say thank you, because a task force has been set up by them and by us to begin to work on some of these things. They've already met once, and good stuff is going on there. There's a lot of work to be done, and but yet there's just a great spirit of getting this work done. It's going to be a win-win for all of us. So I just wanted to say thank you and let everyone know that that a situation that has come up is now being worked on, and that is good. As Joe said, please continue to shop here and eat here with the good news that Adam shared. Hopefully we can begin to dine in a little bit once we go to the red tier, and that will be good. So we're happy about that. Lastly, Mayor, I appreciate the fact that you opened up with the acknowledgement of the women that have been serving us elected wise, and I have been blessed to serve with 2 of those. And I just want to say a additional thank you to the women that are a part of our city team. They do a tremendous work, and they lead in amazing ways. Directors, all kinds of folks that serve, and I just want to say thank you for the great work that you do, that allows us to do some of the amazing things that we do. I also want to say thank you to my incredible wife and the daughter-in-law that I have. Women who are strong and passionate, and has forever changed me. So, Mayor, thank you for taking time to recognize those that have been chosen to serve us. So thank you. And with that, that's all that I've got. Thank you.
Thank you for a good report, Mendel. Adam, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just really quick. And I know Mendel doesn't want to brag too much about himself, but we're happy to report that Mendel's been selected to sit on the Gold Line Construction Authority board in a seat that's appointed by, of all things, the city of South Pasadena. So when the Gold Line Authority was set up, there are different voting members. We are happy to report that the Councilman Thompson is now one of those members. I'm sure as everyone's celebrating the reopening of Glendora Avenue, no longer having to take some other ways around, we have a seat at that table and a voting seat. So just a sincere appreciation to the councilman for his efforts to be on that board and have a vote. And it'll really help us advocate for changes as we move forward.
Well, thank you, Adam. You took some of my thunder away.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too congratulate the Gold Line and welcome you to try out the new crossing. It's wonderful. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to take a tour of the Glendora Station site that is under construction and learn some more about that. It looks exciting, and they're working very hard to give us their best product. I'm sure that will come. And I would like to thank the public that made comments tonight. I heard you. Well done. Let's see if we can figure that out. Some of those questions, and excellent points. Thank you with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Yeah, while we're still talking about the Gold Line, I think it's important to note that We got Barranca open, we got Glendora Avenue open, but we're a long way from being done. So for those of you that are going to be affected, up next is going to be Vermont is going to be closed. I believe it's starting next week, as is Elwood. So, you're going to have to do a little bit of rerouting. It's not going to be as disruptive as major streets like Glendora and Barranca were, but those are going to be the next ones to be closed. And we're just trying to keep, closing 2 streets down at a time so these guys can get the work done as quick as possible. Couple of things I'd like to announce. It's been a while since we have had one of our community conversations. And as we're starting to see things get a little bit back to normal, we've held a few of them as Zoom meetings, and they're never quite as effective than when we have the ability to get in a room together and have these conversations. But Mendel and I have talked, and we'd like to schedule another community conversation that's going to be taking place on March 24th. That is a Wednesday. So it's Wednesday, March 24th at 7 o'clock. We'll be sharing links and sending out information for the Zoom meeting for people to call in. Well, as always, we'll talk about anything everyone wants to talk about, but the one subject we really would like to continue to get feedback on is a lot of our what we're calling first mile, last mile projects that Stephen Mateer, our transportation director, has done such a great job in presenting this and helping us to plan that out. But with the station coming, it's really important that we take the proper steps to make sure that getting to and from the station and the things around the station are going to be what's best for the community. The bike paths that are on Glendora Avenue between the post office going up to the village, it's been in place for a while. Now with Glendora Avenue open, we'll be able to see exactly how that's going to affect us. So that will be a big part of the conversation that we'll have at night. So again, it's going to be Tuesday or Monday. I'm sorry. It's going to be Wednesday, March 24th at 7 p.m. And if anybody's interested and wants to get the link, feel free to email me. You can find me online. I also would like to ask Adam or the chief, we always have subjects that are coming up, but one of the things that has been starting to come up again is our parking situation. Through COVID, we have loosened up the parking restrictions here in the city because people have caretakers coming in and kids home from school and stuff. But we discovered that the parking in the alleys is something that we really don't have a full understanding of exactly how that can be enforced. And we need to make sure that those alleys are clear and safe and everybody has access. So I would like to request that maybe in a future council meeting, we can take a look at that and get an update on exactly how our ordinance read the parking restrictions in the alley. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
I think just like any community, there's some long-standing traditions as relates to alley and on-street parking, and we're happy to provide some of those past policies and have that discussion.
Okay, appreciate it. And then Mendel laid the groundwork, but the fact that it is Women's Month in my household, it's Women's Month every month of the year. But I got to tell you, it's like as we take a look back in our past, and especially what's happening right now in our community, in our state, in our country, the effect that women have had on changing a lot of the ways that we do things for the better. And it is, I think there's not a man alive that doesn't realize that without the women in our lives and the women in leadership and the women that are the backbone of this community, none of us would be getting very far. So hats off to everybody, and thank you for your service. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Karen?
Thank you. This week, we have a special emphasis in Glendora, especially in the faith community, on hunger relief. Started many years ago, being an emphasis during the Lenten season as part of spiritual disciplines. But once again, this week, folks can support efforts to help those who are facing food insecurity with supporting the crop walk. And this year it's virtual. You can contact Reverend Hillary Chrisley, who was on the call earlier with our invocation, at 335-4058, or you can look up the East San Gabriel Valley Crop Walk online. You can donate online. You can sign up to be a walker. And then another piece of that effort this week is the annual Empty Bowls event, which will be this Friday at the parking lot at 300 North Glendora Avenue from 5 to 7. This year it will be a drive-through event. So we invite folks for $20. You'll get a beautiful ceramic bowl and a coupon to go to one of the supporting restaurants when you go for your next meal, and you will be entitled to a free bowl of soup. The idea is that not only are you helping those who are facing food insecurity, but you are also helping our local businesses by going to support them through your purchases there. So those are two events this week that you could support, and a way to show your support for your neighbors in Glendora. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Karen. In response to Ms. Hamilton's public comment, it's important for public dialogue to move our society forward. We may not always agree, but it's important to have civil communications. Can I have my slide for the pictures for the goal line, please? So Councilmember Friedendahl and myself had the opportunity, as David mentioned, to tour the construction site for the new Gold Line station. We were able to see firsthand the progress that was made. They took a great deal of time in showing us not only were they doing the big pit with the underground tunnel up to the station center, but also at the time before Glendora was open, they only had, I guess, one track laid at that time, and they moved really fast. That was only, what, about 2 weeks ago, David, or so, week and a half? So they moved really fast with that. I don't know, do we have the pictures, Kathleen?
I didn't receive any emails. I would have incorporated it. I'm going to look through emails right now to see if I can find one to pop up for you.
Okay, no worries. And I would also like, again, to thank Mendel for his ascension to the Gold Line Construction Authority Board. I know, Mendel, you worked extremely hard to get that. It wasn't an easy task, but you did it. And Glendora, the city of Glendora is much better off for doing that, because now you have your eyes and ears on that, and it's going to be for the betterment of the Gold Line going through our city with direct contact with the authority. Greatly appreciating. Congratulations again. So with that, bring us to, does anyone wish to reorder or add anything to the agenda at this time? Hearing none, that'll bring us to the public hearing. Conduct a public hearing and consider staff's recommendations to adopt a resolution and ordinance amending the Glendora General Plan, Community Plan 2025, Land Use Element, Zone Change Development Plan Review, and Tentative Track Map number 82949 to consolidate 3 parcels and subdivision sites, 0.72 acres of land to create 8 attached 3-story residential homes, townhomes, and commercial building located at 501 West Route 66 and 532 Parker Drive, Glendora, California. Project number PLN 19-0046. Applicant project's sponsor is Robert Artura, 501 East Route 66 Partners, LLC, Building Works Development, LLC, property owner, a successor agency to the Glendora Community Redevelopment Agency. That was a mouthful. I'd like to invite Associate Planner Natalie Espinoza to present the staff report, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. Tonight's presentation is for a proposed project located at 501 West Route 66 and 532 Parker Drive. Next slide. The applicant is requesting that the City Council approve the following discretionary items. A general plan amendment to change the general plan land use designation for the 2 northern parcels from high density residential to Route 66 specific plan. The general plan land use designation for the southern parcel would remain its existing Route 66 specific plan designation. A zone change to change the zoning designation for the 2 northern parcels from multifamily residential to town center mixed use. The zoning designation for the southern parcel would also remain as town center mixed use. A development plan review for a single-story 1,000 square foot commercial building and 8 3-story townhomes with attached garages within 2 buildings. A tentative tract map number 82949 to consolidate the 3 parcels and subdivide the land to create a development consisting of a single commercial building and 8 attached 3-story residential townhomes, along with shared supporting community infrastructure, landscaping, lighting, and common areas, and the associated Sql Initial Study and mitigated negative declaration of the project. Next slide. The project site is located on the north side of West Route 66 and on the east side of Parker Drive. The project site is surrounded by multifamily residences to the north and south, single-family residences to the west along Parker Drive, mobile homes to the east, and the El Amigo restaurant is the corner parcel to the southwest. Next slide. The project site is currently a vacant site that encompasses the 3 parcels. The project site currently has remnants of a building foundation, a partial parking lot surface, of which both will be demolished, and 14 non-native trees that will also be removed. And this is the street views from Route 66 and from Parker Drive. Next slide. On February 2nd, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for the proposed project. Discussion items included clarification on parking for the commercial building and the residences, and also the process to rezone adjacent properties. The Commission considered all evidence and concluded the hearing with a unanimous recommendation for the City Council to approve the project items. On February 24th, the property owners within a 2,000-foot radius were sent new notices regarding tonight's public hearing. The physical notice board at the project site was updated, and new notices were published in the San Gabriel Valley Examiner. Next slide. In September 2008, the site was acquired by the Glendora Community Redevelopment Agency to implement a redevelopment plan to alleviate blight and facilitate development of the property. When the state dissolved the redevelopment agency in 2012, the city elected to serve as the successor agency. In 2016, the California Department of Finance approved the 2016 Long Range Management Plan, which allows the successor agency to sell the properties. The city marketed the site for sale and requested proposals for developments that include both residential and commercial components. Next slide. As previously mentioned, the project consists of several entitlements, including a general plan amendment to change the land use designation of the 2 northern parcels from high density residential to Route 66 specific plan. The slide shows the existing general plan land use map. And as you can see, the 2 parcels in orange are the ones that are high density. And then the purple shows the Route 66 specific plan. Next slide. This shows the revised general plan land use map, which shows all 3 parcels being part of the Route 66 specific plan. Next slide. To create a development where both residential and commercial uses are allowed and compatible with the existing adjacent uses, located within the Route 66 specific plan, the northern parcels need to have the consistent general plan designation as the parcel to the south. There are land use, there are land use, environmental, and urban design specific plan objectives that support the proposed general plan amendment to create a consistent, consistency of the land uses. Next slide. These next two slides show several general plan land use goals and policies that affect the application and are also relevant to redesignating the general plan land use designation of the two northern parcels. Next slide. Next slide. The existing zoning designation of the two northern parcels is multifamily residential, and the southern parcel is zoned town center mixed use. Per the California Government Code, a city zoning ordinance is required to be consistent with the general plan. Since the general plan designation of the two northern parcels is being changed to be consistent with the southern parcel, then the two northern parcels are being rezoned to provide consistency throughout the site. This slide shows the proposed zoning map, with the three parcels having consistent zoning. And next slide. This shows the existing zoning map with the two northern parcels being multifamily residential. Next slide. A tentative tract map is being requested to consolidate the three parcels and subdivide the land to create a development with the 8 townhome condos and 1 commercial building. The 1,000 square foot commercial building shown in purple is proposed along the street frontage of Route 66. The townhomes showed in yellow are proposed within 2 buildings and will range between 1,625 square feet to 2,500 square feet of livable square footage. Next slide. Next slide. This is the proposed site plan, which shows the location of the 3 buildings. Vehicular access is provided from both Route 66 and Parker Drive. Surface parking is located at the rear of the commercial building. Parking for the residential units is located within attached garages. Pedestrian access is provided from the parking lot between the residential building and commercial building, and also through decorative entrance with an access gate and overhead trellis facing Parker Drive. Both pedestrian walkways lead to an open landscaped courtyard. A bit later in my presentation, I'll show renderings provided by the project architect that depict the proposed project site. Next slide. The Route 66 specific plan guidelines state that new projects are expected to promote diversity or architectural style while maintaining continuity of scale, pedestrian amenities, pattern of open space, and use of landscaping. The specific plan also allows for a variety of architectural styles and promotes diversity in new development. The proposed architectural style is Spanish Colonial Revival, which includes low-pitched gable roof with clay mission tiles, stucco exterior finishes, multi-pane casement windows with color accents, exposed wood rafter tails and headers, and wrought iron railing to add visual interest. Next slide. This is the floor plan of the proposed commercial building, which shows a open area. It's just the shell of the building, essentially, for an office that wants to move in, a restroom and storage room. Next slide. This is the south or front elevation facing Route 66. So you can see it includes Spanish Colonial Revival architectural features that I just mentioned. The next slide, please. This is the east elevation. which is the elevation from the driveway off of Route 66. Next slide. This is the west elevation. And the next slide shows the south elevation, which is what's visible from the parking area at the rear of the building. Next slide. The picture on the left shows, again, the existing view from Route 66. And then the picture on the right is a rendering of what the proposed view will be from Route 66. And this again is the commercial building. Next slide. These next 3 slides show the proposed floor plans for the townhomes. All of the townhomes include common areas, such as a kitchen, dining room, and living room. 7 of the units will have 3 bedrooms, and 1 of the units will have 4 bedrooms. Each of the units will have an outdoor terrace area. You can, the next 3 slides. This shows the south elevation of building A. This is the north elevation. Next slide. This is what the elevation is, and this is also the street view for Parker Drive. Next slide. This is the north elevation. Next slide. And the south elevation of building B. Next slide. Next slide. And this is the existing street view of the project site from Parker Drive on the left. And this is the proposed view of Parker Drive once the project is completed. And then the next couple slides show additional renderings of the architect that the architect provided. So this is also off of Parker Drive. And then this is from within the courtyard, the proposed courtyard. Next slide. This is also showing the townhomes and the courtyard area. All areas not covered by structures and hardscape will be landscaped and irrigated to comply with the Glendora Municipal Code requirements. The proposed plant material will be comprised of drought-tolerant species. Additionally, the final landscape plans will also comply with the state's model water efficiency ordinance. Next slide. A Sql Initial Study was required due to the proposed general plan amendment. With the assistance of an environmental consultant, the initial study was completed and it was found that the project will not have a significant effect on the environment. Therefore, a draft mitigated negative declaration was prepared along with mitigated measures that need to be met. The public review period for the initial study and draft mitigated negative declaration started on November 23rd and concluded on December 23rd. We received typical comments from the LA County Sanitation District and the LA County Fire Department Land Development Unit, which will be incorporated into the project when submitted for plan check at the respective agencies. Next slide. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt the resolution approving the mitigated negative declaration pursuant to CEQA and the amendment for the general plan to change the general plan designation of the 2 northern parcels. Adopt the ordinance approving a zone change from multifamily residential to town center mixed use, and also adopt a resolution approving tentative track map number 8294 and the development plan review and the project plans. I am available if you have questions, and so is the project architect and property owner.
Thank you, Natalie. I'd like to invite the applicant for the project, Mr. Jason Baumgartner, to speak.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you up front to planning. It's been a pleasure working with Mark and Natalie. And thank you everyone for your time tonight. My name is Jason Baumgartner. I'm with EBTA Architects, and we're speaking on behalf of Building Works. Building Works is Glendora native. They're local builders who focus on appropriately scaled and detailed buildings rather than developing to the maximum size that the code will allow. We always love working with people that are so detail oriented and produce such beautiful buildings. So in the care of those two items, their projects always fit within the character of the community and aim to set a high quality standard or a standard of quality for other projects to follow. And that was the goal on this project. And we'll speak to that point a bit out after explaining the scope of the project a bit. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the project is going to have two addresses, 501 West Route 66 for the office building and 532 Parker Drive for the residential buildings. The site is 0.72 acres and, as Natalie mentioned, consists of 3 parcels that we'd like to consolidate into one. The residential portion of the building has 8 units within 2 buildings. There's a 3-unit and a 5-unit building. There are 2 unique residential plans. So plan 1 occurs one time and has 4 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. It's got a 2-car garage and 1 dedicated outdoor parking space. Plan 2 occurs 7 times and has 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Again, they each have a 2-car garage and share 4 outdoor parking spaces together. In addition, there's 1 commercial building that fronts Route 66 and is a single-story office unit, 1,000 square feet in size. Next slide, please. We have new landscaping scattered throughout the project. We have a larger than required open space area at the residential units. It's 5,050 square feet, 3,000 required. We're planning to put 39 trees to replace the 14 that we're removing. There are 25 parking spaces total, and 21 of those are dedicated to the residential, 4 to the office. Next slide, please. So I'd like to go back at this point to talk about community and start a project walkthrough as the community will experience the building. So starting along Route 66 at the office building, as a pedestrian, you're greeted by low landscape walls, which form an inviting courtyard flanked by 2 mature trees. And we kind of envision this space as a nice area for the office to go out and maybe have lunch. It's right next to the El Amigo Mexican restaurant, so that'd be a great place for them to pick it up. There's a nice landscape buffer between that space and the street, Route 66. So anybody driving by or walking by will appreciate the softened building with a Spanish style character that feels appropriate to the neighborhood. And as you come around the project, you walk past the El Amigo restaurant, then you're greeted by a pedestrian gate along Parker Drive. Passersby will experience lush landscaping as they continue down the street and an open lawn area where there's a private entrance to the largest unit on the property. Next slide, please. At the top left, that is the unit that I was speaking of. So that's a view from Parker Drive, looking back at the building. That is the private access to the 1 unit. Top right is where the other 7 residents would enter and their guests. We have an elaborate gate with a roof as well. So we put a lot of special emphasis onto this elevation as it is our residential frontage. As we continue down Parker Drive, it becomes a residential street. So that was really important for us to make it feel like a residence. And I'll talk a bit about the scale here in a minute. While the building's 3 stories, we put special care into making sure that nobody ever experiences it as a 3-story building. So the views at the bottom of this are the 5 unit is on the right and the 3 unit is on the left. This is a view from the courtyard looking back at the building. As you can see, there's just a 2-story facade that you experience as you're walking around in there. And the third story is set back far enough where you really have to be looking across the courtyard, which you typically never experience a building like that. So you will never notice that it is a 3-story building. Next slide, please. So this is the commercial building. I'd like to talk a bit about the scale here as well. Across the street, there are 3- and 4-story buildings. That was not the approach that these developers wanted to take. They wanted to take something more pedestrian scale, very inviting, and let's see here. Talking a bit about the details, we have given a lot of emphasis to the entry of this, both by the form of the building and its axial entry. The doors and windows are metal clad. There's exposed ironwork throughout, an awning, plaster relief, scalloped door frame, Spanish tile work. These details are carried throughout to the residences as well. If we could jump ahead 3 slides, please.
Jason, can you bring this to a closure? You're bumping up against your 10 minutes, and I'll give you an opportunity for rebuttal after I open up public comment.
Sure. In conclusion, we're very grateful to be given the opportunity to work on this project. Planning has been wonderful, and very supportive of the design, and we hope that you appreciate the Spanish style and what we're trying to achieve with a sense of community here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, very much. At this point, I'm going to open up public comment, invite members of the public to address the City Council. Each public speaker will be limited to 3 minutes uninterrupted. Please address your comments to me, the presiding officer. Elvie, do we have anyone wishing to speak at this point in time?
Give me a couple seconds. No, at this time, we've not received anything via email or via the Zoom participants to give testimony.
Does anyone on the call wish to speak? If so, raise the hand.
You have no requests coming in.
Okay. Then I will close the public comment period. And Jason, would you like to make any closing remarks?
No, not at this time. We're available for any questions. I appreciate your time again.
Great. Thank you, Jason. So I'll close the public comment period and bring it back to council. Mendel?
Mayor, thank you. And I'll try to make this short. I know we have a lot to talk about yet. Jason, thank you. And I want to profoundly say thank you again for adhering to a request that I always make, that there's my friends are laughing, but
I know where you're going with this.
I really appreciate the fact that 7 of the 8 homes have a bedroom on the first floor. That is normally not the case. And I want to say thank you for considering the fact that that older people are going to own those. They may not at first, but they will someday. And they're not going to want to climb stairs to go up to bed. So thank you for thinking about that and doing that. I like the look, the feel. So appreciate that. Just some questions on the office. Any thought of what you're looking at for who's going to go in there?
Sure. At this time, the developer is considering using it as a satellite office, maybe with 3 or 4 employees. But that may change in the future. We don't want to limit ourselves to that. But that is the plan.
Okay. Price range. Can you give us a feel for kind of the range that those are going to be selling for?
I've not talked about specific numbers with the developer, but we're estimating that this will be in the mid to mid high units.
Okay. I'm not sure that you set a price, so you don't know of a price there, or?
No, I'm not aware of a price right now. is there any way we could open it up to the developers to speak? Robert and Frank Artura.
Sure, absolutely. Robert or Frank?
They're both unmuted, I believe.
Robert's the one that says Luke's Home Design.
Okay, hold on one second.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you're going to need to reopen the public hearing if you're going to take that additional testimony.
Well, then it's not a big deal. You know, I don't want to create more time, so that's okay. Jason, is solar embedded in these, or is it just wired for those to be affixed?
We are assuming that we're going to have panels on top of the solar, on top of the tiles.
Yes.
But so at this time, new residences are required to have solar. So it will be a part of the project.
Okay. My last question is on, comes from the project memo on page 6. I'm not sure if I understood that gas is going to be embedded with every home. It says here gas will be made existing to a main gas line. So am I to assume that electric and gas will be a part of every home?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jason, and to the Arturas. I'm thrilled to see an exciting, comfortable presentation of a new product and a new design. I think that the soft setbacks, the comfortable view of it, and the warmth of it is tremendous, and it's very refreshing in today's architecture that likes to put refrigerator boxes with holes cut in them on sidewalks for new architecture. So thank you for bringing a very attractive, well-detailed and comfortable project. With that, I support it and I have no other questions.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Yeah, I do have just a couple of questions. I'm looking at the parking issue, and my understanding is we got 4 spots dedicated to the office and then 5 visitor spots dedicated to the residents. Is that correct?
It's 4 for the commercial unit, 4 specifically for guests, and 1 is dedicated to the larger unit.
Jason, I don't know if you could answer that.
He just did, Gary. Still with us, Gary? Did you freeze up?
Oh, okay. And, pardon me?
Sure, I'll answer that again. So the commercial unit has 4 dedicated parking spaces. The 8 residences share 4 guest spaces, and the largest unit, 1, has 1 dedicated outdoor space as well.
You get that, Gary?
Okay. So the next question is my sound not coming through?
Your sound's
You may have
coming
lost
through,
me.
but you might want to turn your video off. Your bandwidth isn't so good.
Okay, we'll try, see if that helps at all.
We're losing you, Gary.
So my question was, is it spelled out in the CC&Rs as far as the parking, or will that be something? Oh, shucks. Okay, I'm good, Michael.
Jason, are the CC&Rs going to dedicate the parking spots to who they go to?
Yes, they will. It's a planning requirement that they be divided up like this.
Okay, that answer your question, Gary? You can just nod. All right, thank you. Karen?
Thank you. And thank you to all of you working on this. It's been a long time trying to figure out what to do with that piece of property. And even at that, trying to figure out an attractive way to have the mixed use. So thank you so much. I love the little courtyard in the back. Reminds me of growing up at Park La Brea in LA with the garden apartments in the courtyard. So thank you very much. And I think it will be a great addition to those lots over there. So thank you for coming up with this solution, and thank you to staff for helping lead this through.
Thank you, Karen. And Jason and the Arturo brothers, you guys have listened because your project is absolutely beautiful. I think Frank knows what I like and what I've been talking to him over the years. And he hit it out of the park with this development on a strange lot to develop. So my hat's off to everyone involved with this, including our city staff. It's a very nice project, and I look forward to seeing it being built. At this time, I'd like to request a motion.
Also,
I would move approval.
Thank you. I hear a motion from Councilmember Friedendahl and a second by Councilmember Thompson. I will take a roll call vote. I'm going to read the recommended action just because we've got some resolutions and ordinances here. So the recommended action is to adopt a California Environmental Quality Act mitigated negative declaration related to the attendant resolutions, adopt City Council Resolution CC 2021-05 entitled A Resolution Approving a Mitigated Negative Declaration Pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, and an amendment to the Glendora General Plan, Community Plan 2025 to change the general plan land use designation of certain property at 501 West Route 66 and 532 Parker Drive from high density residential to Route 66 specific plan, project number PLN 19-0046, introduced for first reading of ordinance 2059 entitled an ordinance approving a zone change from multifamily residential R3 to town center mixed use RT66-TCMU on certain property located at 501 West Route 66 and 532 Parker Drive, Glendora, California, project number PLN 19-0046, compliance with California Environmental Quality Act, and 4, adopt a City Council Resolution CC 2021-06 entitled A Resolution Approving the Tentative Tract Map number 82949 and Development Plan Review to allow for the construction of 8 three-story townhome condominium units within 2 buildings and 1 commercial building located at 501 West Route 66 and 532 Parker Drive, Glendora, California, Project Plan 19-0046, compliance with California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. A motion from Councilmember Friedendahl, a second from Councilmember Thompson. I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
and Mayor Alawas.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Well done, LV, on that long read. Let's bring us to the consent calendar, items 5 through 8. Items on the consent calendar will be enacted by one motion without individual discussion unless the council member has requested it to be removed for a separate discussion. Does anyone wish to pull any of the items?
I make a motion to approve items 5 through 8.
You jumped the gun there a little bit, Karen. I'm pulling item number 7. So then if we can have a motion for items 5, 6, and 8.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. That is a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Davis and second by Mayor Thompson to approve 5 through 8 with the exception of item 7, which is pulled for separate discussion. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
and Mayor Alawas.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvia. Let's see. Adam, would you like to take item number 7? Or Stephen?
Stephen's on the call. He's
Yeah.
ready to rock and roll on item 7 for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council. My name is Stephen Mateer. I'm the Transportation Manager. The item before you is to increase the budget for closeout costs related to the demonstration first last mile project on Glendora Avenue. Next slide, please. Apologize, you might hear my new family member in the background, little dot, I'm sorry. So I'll give you an overview, what a demonstration project is, the current status, the closeout funding, what we're seeking to do with it, and then the next steps for the project. Next slide, please. So the demonstration project is part of a longer term vision for first last mile projects. It supports a number of goals, specifically connecting the station to the village, both physically as well as through hopefully future economic development, improve road safety. And as I mentioned, we've heard a lot through this is to feel the village extended further south. And we're hoping that some of these improvements can catalyze some of that development or some of that progress. Next slide, please. So this demonstration project, these are temporary improvements, and that's something I think is very important to emphasize. And this is what we've heard in the survey, is there is some, this is not the final product or even the final design. This was done cheaply and done to be just more of a test. As I mentioned, test concepts such as the bike lane, curb extensions, landscaping, as well as continental crosswalks. As I mentioned, we used lower cost materials. So that's what you see some of those delineator posts, which unfortunately they tip over sometimes very easily. We also have the planters, which are part of a grant funding, as well as tape. Most of the lines that you see on the road are in fact just tape and requires us to go out there periodically to patch up areas. We're also continuing our public outreach. This was really an effort to engage residents that we may have missed over the past 2 years of planning activity. And I'm happy to say we've actually reached, I'll talk about this in the next slide, over 500 residents through our survey. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've heard so far is we've had a total as of Monday, 532 surveys taken, which for me was a really great outcome of this project or so far. Typically with an online survey, only maybe a couple hundred. To get 500 really is great. And I think it speaks to the importance of this as well as continuing community dialogue. What we have heard is that aesthetics matter. This was true both of people who were in favor and who were critical of the project. I think this is particularly important for those who may be a big fan of a bike lane. They did note that they see the value of it. It's just it needs to not look cheap or look like a temporary project. One thing we did hear is the turn radius is also important, particularly turning onto Glendora Avenue from Foothill Boulevard. So luckily with a demonstration project, we've been able to make adjustments on the fly. And so we, for example, placed a limit line back on the left turn lane as well as move the turn radius back. One thing we did hear in terms of positive feedback is that the bike lane does feel safer, particularly for families using the facility, as well as a growing demand for bike improvements. About 55% of those surveyed said that if the city were to build more bike and pedestrian infrastructure, they would consider walking or biking. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, part of the funding we're seeking tonight is to close out the project. Just as a reminder, the upfront costs were funded by the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, as well as city bike and pedestrian funding. The closeout costs are essentially to fund the maintenance and the materials, for example, watering of the plants that were donated by Glendora Gardens, as well as the changeable message sign, and also the maintenance, which covers the materials such as the tape and delineator posts. We're also adding in a traffic assessment. We have a very unique opportunity to test before and after counts with a bike lane and then without a bike lane once we take it out at the end of the month. And also too is to cover costs for restriping Glendora. This will be a really nice fresh coat of paint on the street. And I think, I also want to take time to recognize the residents and businesses on Glendora Avenue that have contributed and been very patient with us. Next slide, please. So in terms of the next steps is to close out the survey, finish the ongoing bike and pedestrian counts, which we have right now, complete the traffic assessment, and then restripe Glendora. Once we've compiled all of our data, we'll be bringing a report back to council summarizing the feedback and as well as the lessons learned from this. Next slide. So the action before you is to authorize the Administrative Services Director to make budget appropriation of $25,000 from Fund 203 and also $12,450 from Measure M for the restriping project. And with that, I can take any questions the council has.
Thank you, Stephen. The reason why I pulled this for is I've been getting a lot of questions on this, and it's difficult because this is just a demonstration and you can only do so much with tape and some temporary polls. So people get sometimes the wrong impression on this. Just for clarity, this demonstration as it is right now will end at the end of the month, correct?
That's correct. We're targeting, I believe, let me look at the calendar real quick. The week of the 22nd is when we would start removal. And it would take, yeah, so it will take a couple days to remove and then to restripe. So we're aiming to have it all wrapped up by the end of the month.
So just for clarity, I know that you need to do some more studies, and I think the next study we'll do is probably not going to be the last, but with the opening of the goal line about 5 years away, together with debate whether you're going to have security on the goal line, if ridership is going to be free, all this is going to take into effect traffic, whether it's going to be from the goal line or foot traffic or pedestrian traffic. Why would you want to do this study now as opposed to when it's closer to the goal line opening, so you have a better idea of the traffic?
Oh, that's an excellent question. First, I would say that the current traffic counts the city has are from 2017, so they're about 4 years old and are dated. So this would give us fresh information, fresh counts for this stretch. This is also a very unique opportunity to assess how a street would operate with a bike lane and without. Glendora does not have a bike lane. We have really no experience with these types of projects. So this would allow us to collect fresh data now. Another thing too is that we can absolutely do another demonstration project years from now. There's just no guarantee that the funding would be there or that we'd have the same grant opportunities that we have currently. So really, this is a great opportunity to get a quick traffic study in, get some excellent data, help us understand the travel demand patterns on the street. And then, if we need to, we can always revisit with another demonstration later as we get closer to opening.
So the total ask is $37,450, correct?
That's correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
So then out of curiosity, when we first got the original grant, why wasn't the $12,450 including that to bring it back to original?
At the time we hadn't reached out to get quotes yet on the bid for restriping. And so now this reflects the outreach with the pavement company to do the striping. And we also had a shifting deadline from originally ending it in February to ending it at the end of March. And so that's why we're returning right now as part of a closeout item.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Does anyone have any questions for Stephen?
I do. I have one related to the traffic assessment. Doing the traffic assessment, you feel is something that needs to be outside sourced versus in-house staff, just due to staff time and capacity?
Yeah, that's why we've selected JMD to complete the traffic assessment. They are staff in some ways, but they are an independent consulting firm. They were not involved in their planning of this project at all. And so they would be, in my opinion, a neutral source to review this project.
Okay, and while there was some assessment going on with the test in place, you did answer my next question for a second assessment to go back to assessing the reality of the pre-test environment. So you have a comparison. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. Yeah. So we would do one traffic count now with the bike lane in place. And then once the bike lane is removed and Glendora Avenue is restored to the original configuration, we would do another count at that point.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone care to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Mayor.
We have a second.
I will second.
Elvia?
Thank you. That's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Davis, a second by Councilmember Friedendahl, I believe. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl?
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Yes.
And Mayor Alawas?
Yes.
And item 7 passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvia. This brings us to unfinished business number 9, Glendora Village Parklet Program, Adoption and Appropriation. I'd like to invite, again, Transportation Manager Steve Mateer to present the staff report.
Hi, thank you again, Mayor. Good to see you all again. The item before you is to adopt the Parklet program and appropriate funding to allow us to go out to bid for the materials and installation of the Parklet program. Excuse me, got tongue-tied. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, Elvia, one more slide. Sorry, thank you. For an overview, we'll go over what are Parklets, review the Parklet manual, the design of the Parklets, the funding plan, schedule, talk about the Meta Avenue visioning that we're proposing as well, and the next steps for the projects. Next slide, please. So Parklets are extensions of the sidewalk. Really, it's creating new public space in what is essentially a parking spot. It's really a community partnership between the city and restaurants or businesses for creating more public space in areas that may be constrained. The city's currently Parklet program was a temporary response to the pandemic, as well as indoor dining restrictions. The current design of what we have right now is not compliant with the MDTCD, and we're also approaching about a year of it being in place, at which point it's no longer considered a pilot program and the city has to take corrective action to either bring the facility up to standards or to find a different solution to those. As I mentioned, the designs that we have proposed tonight bring them up to the standards and are compliant with both ADA and the MDTCD. Next slide, please. What we've heard is that there's a high degree of support. All of the restaurants that have used the existing Parklets have noted that not only has it helped support their business through the pandemic, in some cases it's actually resulted in higher sales or more economic activity than they previously had. So really this has been a great success story. It supports further economic vitality. You really get a lot of eyes on the street, and it creates a sense of being busy and vitality. And also too is the need for fast installation. One of the things that we don't want to have is a Parklet taking weeks or months to install. We want to have something that goes in quickly and works the first time. It does support our strategic plan goals of economic development in the village and transportation in terms of encouraging more walking and biking in the village. Next slide, please. So what we have created to help restaurants apply for a Parklet is the application form. It covers a maintenance and indemnity agreement. Also requires restaurants to submit an encroachment permit, show proof of liability insurance. We've also requested them to give us a representation of their Parklet furnishings, being table, shade structures, those types of things, as well as a copy of any current outdoor dining permit and ABC license. Next slide, please. We're proposing to build, sorry, I've cut off there. We're proposing to build 7 Parklets. So coming north from Foothill, we have Cara's Corner, which will be part Cara's, part shared with the city. Also, we have Classic and, Ed's Place and Crust and Crumble will be shared. Across the street will be Classic and Domenico's, which will also be split between the 2 restaurants. Luca Bella, Red Lounge, Village Eatery, and also Vault and Diplomat. The Vault and Diplomat one's quite large, and that will also be shared between the 2 restaurants. Next slide, please. This is a typical cross section of the Parklet. We're proposing 10-foot depth or 10-foot out into the street. The cross section does show a larger plan. We went with a 10-foot design in that it is larger than your typical Parklet. But it also has a standard size throughout the village and actually allowed us to save some costs in terms of our estimates. We have landscaping and planter options, as well as cable or other safety railings. And in certain areas, we've recommended putting in bike racks, and in all cases, all Parklets have wheel stops and a delineator post for traffic safety. Next slide, please. This is our schedule. It's a pretty aggressive schedule, recognizing that we want to get these done as quickly and as possible. We received our final estimates at the end of February. We're tonight seeking your appropriation of the funding to go out to bid. If you approve the appropriation tonight, we can publish the bid on Thursday. We're hoping to have about a 2-week bid window with bid review starting on the 26th of March and lasting probably about 5 days for us to review the proposals. We'll come back at the first council meeting in April to award construction and hopefully start soon thereafter on installation. Next slide, please. So in terms of the funding, we're asking amount not to exceed $500,000. The funding comes from Measure M local return, which is local sales tax dedicated just to transportation. In fact, parklets are an explicit use of Measure M. It's important to note too, we're not saying that we will spend $500,000. We want to have the flexibility to understand the different materials and installation methods that are out there. Typically, parklets are built, you can think of them as like a deck. There are other vendors out there that actually build purpose-built parklets. So essentially you can place them in an hour or so. So we really wanted to have the flexibility to see what different products are on the market and what might actually be the best fit for Glendora Avenue. Next slide, please. In terms of the Mita Avenue and the Bus Plaza reimagining, one of the things that we thought was really interesting is that Mita Avenue has been closed for almost a year now, and it really has not had any adverse impact on traffic flow through the village. And also it's been really a nice kind of outdoor community gathering spot, both in front of T. Phillips and between Frisella's and Sushi and I. We want to consider, or at least go through a visioning process of potentially looking at closing Mita Avenue and having more kind of a public plaza or event programming going on there to bring more people to the village to help support restaurants and shops in the village. And the examples you see here, the top one is in Los Angeles in Silver Lake. It's called the Sunset Triangle Plaza. The city of LA put down paint with some kind of fun patterns, benches, planters. It looks really nice. And then on the bottom, we have fun games like chess, or I saw, one option what I thought was really cool was like a miniature golf course. So there's really fun activities. We want to have something that was fun and really engage the community in thinking about the village as really the center of the town, the gathering spot. And we also want to see the transit plaza as also an opportunity too. It's a great space. It's just not utilized probably the way that we would all like it to be. And so this is also an opportunity for us to explore potential new programming and new design options for that space as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, if we have the appropriation tonight, we can enter into the bid phase. And then once that's completed, start construction of the parklets. Concurrently, while the bid process is going on, my team will be reaching out to each restaurant to assist with completing the parklet application. And then also if we can approve funding for the Mita Avenue and Bus Plaza, or at least the direction to do so, we can proceed with that study as well. Next slide, please. And so here's the item before you, and I'm available to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Stephen. Nice report. Bring it back to council. Mendel?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And Stephen, great job. And I want to indicate my full support to get this approved and get this done ASAP. The summer is coming up quickly, so let's don't mess around. Let's get this done. With that, I would like to ask a few questions. On page 3 of the staff report, it indicates that about halfway down, Stephen, that funding for shade structures is not a part of this. And I personally would like any sort of, for lack of a better term, a covering, a roof sort of covering, whether it's a sail, a lattice, or something to be a part of this. Because my fear is that if not, and during the first rain, these crazy tarps of all shapes, sizes, colors are going to appear, and it's going to really take away from the whole event look and the kind of vibe that I think that we want. So I would really support us making sure that that the whole thing is complete and done well, and not chance another blue tarp appearing once we've invested the kind of money that we're going to. Any thoughts on what we can do to possibly ensure that we consider some sort of covering, since it apparently is not a part of the plan now?
That's an excellent question, Councilmember. Our RFP scope of work indicates that the shade structure will be an optional task. And so we will like to see what different costs we get from builders. The original estimates we received were extremely high. And so we wanted to ensure that we were fitting this into the budget and not, overcommitting ourselves on funding. So if we can get a builder who comes in and can do it for us at a reasonable cost, I agree completely. This is that'd be a great goal to have, and would be really help complete the look of the Parklet program.
Okay, well, I hope that we can do that. Shifting gears quickly to the manual on chapter 2 or part 2. I fully support the goals that are listed there. I also wanted to know on pages 9 and 10, has legal approved all of the legalese that are shown on pages 9 and 10 of that document?
Yes, I have. I don't know if Bill would like to weigh in, but yes, we have reviewed this through legal.
Okay, well, I mean, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure because there's a lot there and it needs to be done. I am a little uncertain as to the sidewalk, the passageway. I know that some of us have felt like it's kind of a sketchy thing to walk down the sidewalk because you're not gonna, you're not sure if you're gonna hit a umbrella pole or a chair or a dog laying out because the table is too far out. So I would hope that some guidance would be given to make sure that sidewalk is clear for everyone to enjoy. Who is the sponsor of a parklet? I'm assuming that's the restaurant. I mean, is that what that term means?
That's correct. Yeah, the applicant or the sponsor would be the restaurant or property owner.
And then in there it says that they are responsible to maintain it. How far does maintaining go? I mean, like if the floor starts to rot out or something, are they the ones that are going to fix it, or are we going to have a standardized sort of maintenance for it?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Something that we've asked ourselves too. I think the intent of that is that day-to-day maintenance and cleanliness would be responsible for to the restaurant or the applicant. If there was a structural defect to the parklet, since the city owns that parklet, we would be responsible for corrective action on that.
Okay, I just didn't see that spelled out.
We'd be happy to clarify that more.
Yeah. And my last question on the manual, page 6, I'm concerned a little bit about 20 lighting. So during festive times, and I'm a festive guy and I love lights, but are we going to have a standard lighting, or are neon lights going to be used by some and disco lights going to be used by others? And I mean, the lighting can go really wide. And is there going to be a consistent theme about lighting? Because cars are going to be driving up and down that street. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want, the lighting or signage that are neon lights to be a safety impediment. So could you explain a little bit about that? And that's all that I've got.
Yeah, I think the intent of number 20 really was to cover so that restaurants weren't running wires over the sidewalk. To have power out there. Your point's well taken about the color, the direction of the light. You don't want a light flashing in the driver's eyes while they're driving over avenue. So I think we can sharpen our pencil, or not sharp, but we can go back and look at the language and provide more clarity there about what we mean by lighting and discuss some of the some type of standards that we can impose.
Yeah, I just think that area needs to be tightened up. So that's all. But otherwise, I think it's great. Want it done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. David?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. A great report and great project. I certainly support it, and I'm excited to get it going with you. A couple things that I'm concerned about, and similar touched on by Mendel. I'm looking at some of the language things and would hope we might tighten up some of the definitions or clarity on some of the items just to avoid the independent interpretation and then having an arm wrestle down the road.
Right.
One of those is in the maintenance section, page 9 that we talked about earlier. Says where to go? Permittee made with the approval of the director or his or her designee and permittee's sole expense, modify the permitted installation. We might, and I'm not looking for the answer right now, but if we might define modify just a bit more. So again, we're not going back and having to undo or redo something that, well, I thought that was a great okay. So, those types of things, just tighten up that a bit. And then my second concern is, while I greatly support it, I'm also hoping that we have a clear path and sidewalk for pedestrian traffic, the unofficial skateboarders, all that good stuff. But I can envision, while it clearly states seating will be done on the parklet deck, hence street side of the curb, well, my mind sees seating on the sidewalk portion between the curb and maybe the brick ribbon, between trees, and just kind of growing. So if we could clarify that so that we end up with the net result of some designated, this is a walkway, not a seating area, specific sidewalk with clear headspace and things, I think we'd be a lot better off and not having to arm wrestle again down the road as this gets up and running.
That's excellent feedback. Thank you.
Hang on a minute. Let me go back and beat on my machine here. Let's see. Yeah, those are the only questions I had. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Yeah, a couple of questions, Stephen. First off, on the shared parklets, are there agreements that are going to be put in place for the business owners as to who has what tables and which responsibilities, or is that going to be left up to the business owners to work out between themselves?
That's an excellent question, Councilmember. The idea is that we would use a planter to delineate the respective spaces on the parklet. Typically, that would be at the property line or the business lot delineation between the two spaces. The intent is that for example, the vault would take care of its section, and then the diplomat would take care of its portion. The one where it's shared between the city and Kara's, for example, the city would be responsible for its portion, and likewise Kara's. Am I answering your question?
Yeah. No, that's what I was curious about, because it's all, everybody works well together, and still you've got a line of people waiting for a table at one restaurant, and the restaurant next door has available tables. So it's just important for that to be addressed. And then my other question is, we always have the issue of parking in the village. It's a conversation we've had for years. I am of the opinion, I always have been, that there's plenty of parking down here. I've worked down here for a long, long time. I've never had an issue with parking, as long as I'm willing to walk a little bit. Is there any plans to do anything to help with some parking signage that might help to direct people where appropriate parking might be? And the one lot that I always think about is the one on Vista Bonita that's virtually empty every day, and is not being used by people that are shopping or working in the village. And I'm just wondering if there's any consideration into adding some additional signage for parking.
That's an excellent question. I know I think there are some decorative wayfinding parking signs I believe.
Yeah, there are some, but they're not real prominent. They're attractive signs, but they sort of blend into the landscape.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great question. We didn't consider that as part of this, but I think in terms of a longer term vision for the village, I think having wayfinding signage for parking will be really important. And that's something we could absolutely roll into. You know.
And I would only add, council member, that we do have on our strategic plan, signage is one of our strategic plan initiatives to look at signage in a variety of areas, including the village area. So we'll take a look at parking as well and add that to the list of items to make sure that we have that available.
Okay, appreciate it. That's all I have. I love this program. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Gary. Karen?
Thank you. And thank you, Stephen, for all your work on this. I think that during this time when we've had the temporary ones, that it really has shown how it can increase that vitality. So looking forward to all of this. And I think it's great that the Bus Plaza, you're looking at new things to do with that, because I really think it's been underutilized. So that is awesome. And to Mr. Boyer's point, yes, fences make good neighbors. So I think those things that will delineate will be great. But I'm looking forward to this and happy to support it. So thank you again to you and staff for all of your work, and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Karen. So Stephen, I have a different play on one of Mendel's comments about the shade. I do like having some sort of a standard for the shade, but by the same token, I like the uniqueness of each business to have their own shade, because you can look down there now and you see a uniqueness, and I think that's part of the charm of downtown. You have a standard that you put in there in your manual, but I like to see each individual owner take care of their own shade requirements based on also approval from the city as well on that. You have between the Vault and the Diplomat, you have a shared parklet. You also have a business that's in between there. And part of the standard, you have that the parklet's only going to be in front of that business. So are you going to diverge on the manual criteria for that?
I know that the I'm sorry, I'm going to forget which. I think it was the Diplomat. I believe they contacted that business at the time, and they got written approval to have the parklet in front. If we'd like, we can shrink the parklet down to fit within the envelope of that business. We were trying as best we could to keep the size of the parklets as they are currently.
I'm not asking one way or another to shrink or anything like that. It's just diverting from the manual requirements.
Mayor, I would just add one other issue too, as well as in Kara's Corner, we have a similar issue. So with the Kara's Corner exists in front of Andrews. And so we actually have a couple of areas where it would be non-exclusive use, it would be a shared use. And I think one of the important things to point out is that, as Stephen mentioned earlier, is the manual is approved. We go through and work with the businesses to ensure they understand the criteria moving forward. So we actually have one of those other areas planned that's a little bit different as well.
All right. So we're approving 7 parklets right now that we're going to be funding. What happens if another business comes in and so they want a parklet in front of their facility?
We could return to council for either additional appropriation or approval of that parklet. That would be my recommendation.
Do we have a maximum number of parklets we want to approve?
I don't believe council set policy on that. That would be, we could recommend a policy, or we could look at that. That would be ultimately up to council.
Because hypothetically, every business then can ask for one, and whether we pay for it or they don't, or they do, we would have no parking.
We would have theoretically no street front parking. You could also look at shifting it from angled parking to parallel. There are some options you could do to realign parking there. I don't think that we would have a situation where every business would have a parklet. These are primarily for restaurants or, really limited kind of grab and go, or just to have a hangout spot in the village.
Okay. Gary had asked one of the questions I was going to ask. I also want to weigh in on Mita and the Bus Plaza. I think it's a great idea. We've had 0 complaints on the closure of Mita, and I think it's wonderful to think outside the box and see what we can do there. Do you have any ideas of what that could even possibly look like? You had 2 slides on that you showed us, but
Yeah.
would the street stay intact? Would we make it grade level with sidewalks? Any ideas what you would think about doing with that?
I think it does, and I'll just speak for myself on this one. I think originally we want to have something that's kind of low cost and easy to test out, right? To see, is this actually the central gathering place we'd want it to be or think it can be? So we could do something, low cost like paint and planters and, different activities. If in the future it becomes, really popular, we could look at raising it to the level of sidewalk. I think for this effort, we really just kind of want to see what the universe of possibilities are.
Yeah, and I would just add to that just really briefly that as we do this design criteria and look and bring that back to the council for discussion, if the council does fall in love with one of the ideas that tends to be more expensive, if you're like my wife and I show you all the flooring you can have, you automatically pick the most expensive one that's out there. We'll definitely work through some of those challenges that are there. So, but as Stephen mentioned, it truly is a visioning aspect and a what could be. And how to provide an amenity for our community as well. And Stephen, just quickly, I know we've talked a lot about parking, but what we've experienced in the village with the parklets is a lot of people riding their bikes, especially as it relates to the Nita Avenue. Would you mind touching just really briefly? I think it's important for the public to understand, and that we've already explained to the businesses, that people will have alternative ways to come to the village. So do you mind touching on the bike and other areas?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I would say it's been interesting too that when we did the temporary parklets, a couple of restaurants asked us to bring out bike racks for their parklets. A couple of them get high volume of bicycles on the weekends, or Classic Coffee, for example, has a number of kids or people getting coffee after their bike ride. So they've been well utilized, and that's something that we've seen, especially with people being at home more, or having more time, or maybe they bought a bike for the first time, then they're using it now. I observed a lot more people are using the bike racks, biking to the village, parking their bikes along the K-rail, the orange K-rails on Mita, as well as using some of their golf. I didn't realize the city had a lot of golf carts that people drive around, and that's been interesting to see people park that there as well. So really, I think there's been a variety of ways that people are getting to the village now, as opposed to just solely driving here.
And so any envisioning of transforming the Bus Plaza, or what you had in mind?
That one's a little more open, certainly more difficult to see, just because, again, there's a lot of design constraints with it. I think part of this would be to engage with a design firm to look at different options, either, for programming, for landscaping, or, hardscape changes. Really, it can be a blank slate at this point. And we really want to see what's out there and what the community responds to.
As it is right now, the transportation department, do they utilize that bus stop that's right there, or that turnout at all?
No, I know none of our vehicles use it, and Foothill Transit does not have a stop there.
Yeah, I know Foothill Transit does, but I didn't know if we did or not.
No, if we have any dollar ride service to the village, it's typically they'll park either behind it or somewhere on the street, and then our fixed route service does not stop in the village at that spot.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Stephen. That's all the questions I have. Does anyone else have any other questions to add? So I'll request a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Elvia?
Sorry, thank you. That's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Davis, a second by Councilmember Thompson. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Yes.
And Mayor Alawas?
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Elvia. This brings us to item number 10, development of a sub-regional homeless housing program, strategic plan item 55 ISHS. I'd like to invite the city manager, Mr. Adam Raymond, to present the staff report.
Good evening again, everyone on the call this evening. We also have Miss Debbie Lopez, Chief Egan's on the call as well. I know Public Works is here as well in case there are any questions that come up. Before we get started, just wanted to publicly recognize Debbie. A lot of what we're going to talk tonight and a lot of the a lot of these successes we've had have been a team approach, but also an incredible amount of work on her end. Hours and hours, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. She gets calls on her personal phone asking for assistance and help, and really finding placement for many people in our community that were without shelter would be for naught if it wasn't for Debbie. So I know we're going to cover a lot of ground tonight, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't cover that topic. She truly is, in this endeavor, the glue that holds a lot of departments together. So while I'll give the majority of the presentation this evening, I think it's important to recognize her for all of her efforts before we get started. Elvia, next slide, please. So we're going to cover, we haven't had a homeless update in a while to the city council. We're asking for specific asks. We're taking the chance to cover several years, but really the focus that we've had during the COVID pandemic and the push to address homelessness in our strategic plan. Next slide, Elvia. Dating back to 2017 is when the city council directed staff and began to address homelessness in a more significant fashion, and that was through the completion of a strategic plan. In September of 2019, we held a homeless workshop for several hours, following up on many items. Several of the items we'll discuss are a direct result of that meeting and the actions taken away. Next slide, please. In December of 2019 and in early January 2020, the staff completed a community survey on homelessness when it began to rise to the forefront of everyone's mind. We also had a request from 2 council members to bring an update back to city council, which is really the key driver for where we are this evening. Next slide, Elvia. As part of the homelessness workshop, we discussed a number of areas where the city could enforce this ordinance for quality of life purposes, and also finding ways to provide services to homeless individuals. We had both a shopping cart ordinance and regulating bulky items in parks that were passed in early 2020 as part of our greater homelessness strategy, and also quality of life strategy that also went with housing, and we'll talk about that next slide, Elvia. In April of 2020, the city council approved $150,000 one-time appropriation of one-time funds to house homeless individuals in the city's hotels and motels that were shuttered due to COVID-19. That was followed up by May 2020 action where the city council received a comprehensive update on strategies and elected a subcommittee of Mayor Pro Tem Davis and Councilmember Boyer to discuss options with city staff and come up with revisions to our strategic plan and look at areas of housing. Next slide, please. In June, we came back to council. There were 3 areas that city staff, Mayor Pro Tem Davis and Councilmember Boyer came back with, and that was addressing both 1, urgent needs to a potential emergency shelter, and 3, the need for permanent supportive housing. As we all know, we have Boise v. Martin case law that exists out of the 9th Circuit that creates varied requirements for cities and really sets the stage for how we need to address homelessness in our community. At that same meeting, the city council also authorized an additional $150,000 to continue to house Glendora, people with ties to the city of Glendora, and our hotels and motels. Next slide, please. We had another one-time infusion of $150,000 that occurred in September of 2020. And also at that time in September of 2020, council directed staff to move forward with the sub-regional housing strategy. I think it's important to note that one of the key cries of cities during the Measure H LASA debate was that cities felt like they were not getting their fair share of funding. And LASA challenged and the county challenged cities that if you look at a sub-regional approach, maybe we'll change our model and look at funding things on a sub-regional level, allowing you to address homelessness locally. And so city council challenged staff, and we partnered and met with the cities of Claremont and San Dimas, as well as the county of Los Angeles, spearheaded largely by Catherine Barger's office. Next slide, please. And also as relates just to council actions in November, we had an amendment with Athens to continue to provide roll-off bins to address our homeless encampment cleanups, also a quality of life issue as part of our well-rounded approach to addressing homelessness. Next slide, please. And finally, our last council action to date is in October of 2020, where council added homelessness to a strategic plan. Previously, it had been various tasks associated with goals. And homelessness became its own goal section with 3 very specific areas to address: sub-regional housing, which we're here tonight to discuss, a supplement homeless operations. With the mid-cycle budget, we did change one of the positions to an analyst to help Debbie with some homeless outreach, and look forward to recruitment in that area as well. Additionally, as part of the subgroup with Mayor Pro Tem Davis and Councilmember Boyer, we're helping to update our homeless strategic plan. Next slide, please. So one of the hallmarks, and especially of this council since I've been here, is a need to engage the community, receive their input, talk widely about key issues, and homelessness is no different. Next slide, please. We've really focused on 3 areas of public engagement. We've had updates at council meetings, including a special meeting. We have a reoccurring Glendora report article that talks about our homelessness strategies and areas of concern that's mailed to every single address in the city, both residential and business. And we've previously talked about the community survey, which we'll go into a little more detail this evening, which I really think sets the stage for how we move forward. Next slide, please. A little over a year ago, True North, who does our biannual community survey, helped us with a homelessness survey. We had, which really spearheaded this in late 2019, an encampment that occurred on the Civic Plaza area. And we were started to receive more calls for homelessness. We had various issues in the village and South Hills and the foothills and other areas of town that we just had not had significant areas before. So the community survey started out with the same question as all communities start out with. What's the one thing, what's the one quality of life issue? And we wanted to see if homelessness came to the forefront of everyone's mind. And sure enough, homelessness was referenced as the top quality of life issue by 27% of respondents in the city of Glendora. What's pretty remarkable about that statistic is in 2018, when we did a community survey, it only represented 8% of respondents, and in 2016, only 2% of respondents. For instance, previous #1, streets and roads, was #2 in our updated survey that we did. Strategic growth and development, which was #2, is down #3. And enhancing public safety, which always ranks in the top 3, was down #4. But homelessness almost doubled the #2 response, which is pretty remarkable. Next slide, please. When the respondents were going over homelessness, I think this slide tells a lot about the views of homelessness in the community. It's split, positive, negative, and neutral. And it represents a lot of the calls and interactions we have with the community, both in residents and business owners and city staff as well. Next slide, please. So after being informed about the legal requirements in Martin v. Boise, providing some background information to the respondents, here are areas where the public would support strategies, and that's counseling and drug rehab, providing funding for mental health facilities, creating a regional homeless shelter and services. 82% of respondents were in favor. Providing housing for homeless with ties to the city of Glendora received 2/3 of an approval. And that really helped inform our decisions as we move forward with housing those people with ties to Glendora and our hotels and motels during COVID. As did the one below it, which was incentivizing underperforming hotels and motels. And at 50% of approval was to build a temporary homeless shelter in the city of Glendora. Next slide, please. When talked about funding, it comes as no surprise. The majority of people wanted the city to work with nonprofit organizations to raise private funds. They wanted the city to seek grant funds for homeless shelters. They wanted the city to provide incentives to developers to build more affordable housing. A third of people said we should raise local taxes. And not surprising whatsoever is only 18% of respondents said we should take funding away from other operations. Next slide, please. So before we move to where we are now, I just wanted to recap for the group. So the public in our responses said, don't use any city resources, find a way to work with others and find grant funding to fund all of this. And part of that is in the proposal we're having tonight. While a steep hill to climb, a lot of leadership on the council and staff here have helped us come to a place where we may be able to make some of that a reality. So where are we now with our homelessness population and areas that we've tried to address? Next slide, Elvia. So annually, LASA, who's our continuum of care provider, provides a point in time count. It's actually a mandate that they have to report to HUD. In 2018, we had 60 unsheltered individuals. The 2019 count showed 65 individuals. The 2020 count, which corresponds with the increase in community concern, showed 144 unsheltered individuals. Our 2021 count to date has been canceled. LASA asked for a waiver and received one due to COVID complications with doing the count during the current environment. And while we have, and you'll see on the slides that follow, we've made a great deal of progress, that point in time count not happening really didn't allow Glendora to show in the numerical value the significant efforts to date. But we feel if you walk around the city or go look around, you see the cleanup efforts in South Hills and addressing homelessness on the civic hall, in the civic area and in the village, we've made great strides, and including our parks as well. Next slide, please. In April of 2020, based on conversation from the city council, staff started to take better account of unique homeless individuals that we met. We have made contact since April 2020 with 181 unique homeless individuals in the city of Glendora. Of those, 65 individuals were provided temporary housing through our hotels and motel program that we have, comprising over 6,300 room nights. 2 individuals have been permanently housed. In addition, with a contribution from one of our local churches, we're able to buy them a refrigerator. So happy, that's a pretty neat story there. 10 individuals were able to take advantage of rapid rehousing, meaning they never actually hit the street and were able to find housing while they lost the homes they were in. 6 individuals have accepted housing for dependency issues. And really, Debbie on this last area was a bulldog with the county, and she got 43 individuals staying with us qualified for Project Room Key rooms. Of those 43 individuals, 23 of them accepted and were transferred to locations in other areas where they could have a full spectrum of services and able to move forward with their journey for permanent housing. Next slide, please. So to date, in order to do the housing, we've allocated a little over $500,000 in both Measure H funds and one-time housing funds. City's currently working to seek FEMA reimbursement for certain costs in the 75% to 100% category due to the COVID emergency. And this program to date has really benefited both our homeless individuals plus our business community, and helping Glendora enforce its ordinances for quality of life issues for the entire community. Next slide, please. So sub-regional housing approach is where we're going to spend a lot of the focus of this evening. So we've provided the background on where we're at. Now we want to talk about an approach to help address homelessness on a sub-regional level. Next slide, please. Attachment B to your staff report this evening. In late 2020, the county received a letter from the County of Los Angeles and LASA on an interim housing proposal. It provides the proposal that an acquisition and rehab of facility with Supervisor Barger's interim housing capital fund pool money, and it considers running the facility through Measure H funding. What is truly unique about this proposal, it allows the cities to house its homeless that would be part of this plan and not the greater Los Angeles County area, meaning we would able to address homelessness on a sub-regional approach, which was the biggest burden and hindrance to cities accepting Measure H funding. They didn't want to build a facility and then be burdened with everyone else's homeless individuals. As part of the letter, cities would work together to set up a process for how people qualify, and it would determine, in order to be part of the sub-regional approach, other agencies, San Dimas, Claremont, and Laverne, would have to decide what they're going to bring to the table to be part of this approach. Next slide, please. Part of the letter, and I don't want to read all the writing here, but there's a key part here that essentially says interim housing is an intervention that provides people experiencing homelessness with temporary housing that is intended to resolve their immediate experience with unsheltered homelessness. And it helps them connect to services to provide longer term housing. And the last paragraph on one of the opening statements of the letter says employing a sub-regional interim housing strategy across an identified cohort of cities will allow for a higher degree of local prioritization to meet the sub-regional needs. This is truly important. This allows the city to work with cities and address local needs that are different than the needs potentially in downtown Los Angeles, for example. Next slide, please. So our sub-regional housing partners that we've been working with are the cities of Glendora, San Dimas, Laverne, and Claremont, moving from west to east, the County of Los Angeles, and LASA. Next slide, please. We have developed as a working group and working with staff and council members from those cities an informal list of guiding principles, and essentially we acknowledge that over a period of time, the subregion can provide a comprehensive set of shared housing resources. These sub-regional partnerships will allow cities potentially to be more competitive for housing grants and other future funding opportunities. It's the ability to coordinate efforts and enforcement in a manner which does not move homeless individuals from one city to the next, but rather addresses the problem. And finally, it acknowledges the cities. This is just one tool in our tool belt and amongst other established partnerships in our effort to address homelessness. Next slide, please. So what each city is preliminarily looking at, and I say preliminarily because all these cities would have to go back to the council, their respective councils for final approvals. But today, Glendora has identified the opportunity to establish an interim housing site for up to 50 beds. It's noted that as of the 2020 point in time count of the approximately 190 homeless individuals, Glendora, in those 4 cities, Glendora accounted for over 140 of them. San Dimas is currently evaluating the opportunity to support emergency shelter housing. They have not determined what that looks like, whether it's pallet housing, a pallet shelters, or another type of shelter. They are currently evaluating the opportunity to assist in emergency sheltering. Next slide, please. Laverne is currently looking at the opportunity of placing an access center in their community, which provides case management, initial place of contact for individuals experiencing homelessness to go receive services, look at potential showers and other facilities, but that's sort of where their current thinking is and where they could provide services in the subregion. And the city of Claremont, quite frankly, has had a much longer term track record of providing permanent supportive housing for homeless individuals, and their role as part of the subgroup would be to provide permanent supportive housing for homeless individuals amongst that sub-regional group of cities. Next slide, please. Previously, we provided the city council with information about where current emergency shelters and where potential interim housing shelters could be located in the city of Glendora. Just as a quick reminder, in 2011, as a requirement of SB2 at that moment, as part of the city's planning requirements, we had to allow for 20 emergency shelter beds to be constructed by right. To date, no emergency shelters have been built, and each site has existing buildings on the property. And any talk about potentially building a 50-bed interim site would start with those locations. Next slide, Elvia. And currently, those locations since 2011 are established here along the Grand Corridor. The first 2 sites are actually on opposite sides of the street from each other, just bordered by Glendora Gardens and the flood control channel off of Grand. There are buildings to both the east and the west. And then additionally on the Grand and Arrow Highway on the northeast corner, a more aerial view. Next slide, Elvia. Here is the Grand Corridor. There's the Glendora Gardens above and the flood control Both of these locations, actually, many people drive by and don't even realize there are buildings at either of these locations as they drive by. Next slide, please. And here's a look at the area and a larger group of many buildings that are there that's also currently zoned in the city's allowable zoning uses for emergency shelter. Next slide, please. So there are 5 major considerations when looking at interim housing site. First one is location. We just went over that, currently allowed, and looking at other future environmental impacts if they're in other areas. Funding, review both short-term and long-term. The proposal we have from the county and LAHSA covers both the short and long-term estimated costs. The number of beds is another major consideration. We've identified the need for up to a 50-bed interim housing site. And currently these locations are zoned for 20 emergency shelter beds. Next slide, please. Length of stay in interim housing is not an emergency shelter. Think of it more of a short-term hotel and between 3 to 9 months while individuals find services to provide longer-term housing. And then finally, a joint effort. What other services are incorporated with this interim housing site to ensure these individuals have a place to go when their time is up? Next slide, please. So next steps, and I apologize, it's been a long presentation. We're covering a lot of ground tonight, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, but wrapping up, our next steps is to reaffirm the sub-regional approach preferred by each member agency. Pretty happy to note so far that each agency thinks they can bring something unique to the table and something that is incorporated in a full supportive housing environment addressing homelessness on a sub-regional level. All the areas that we talked about this evening are important as part of a full service operation, and all of those are included as approved housing strategies by the County of Los Angeles. We'd have to develop and finalize the areas of focus by each agency, develop timelines for moving forward in those areas. Next slide, please. 2, we'd have to, and one of the direction we're seeking tonight is to direct staff to seek and locate potential areas and sites for a 50-bed interim housing facility. And again, we'd have to finalize the location and size. We'd have to validate the offer letter from the county and LAHSA and secure funding commitments in both short-term and long-term, and also develop a timeline there as well. Next slide, please. And finally, the final step would be to develop an MOU with the city's LAHSA and the County of Los Angeles to memorialize everything we've talked about tonight, including a term, roles, and responsibilities, the process with placing individuals in the various housing assets that we spoke about, and identification of funding, both short-term and long-term. Next slide, please. And so with that, tonight, Mayor, we have 3 specific asks of the City Council. The first one is to receive this update. The second one is to continue to allow the city manager to execute and extend agreements with local hotels as we've transitioned from longer-term stays to a more voucher type program to address issues as they've come up. We want to make those changes with the current agreements we have with our hotels and motels. And third, we'd like the City Council to discuss and provide staff direction to come back with potential locations for an interim housing site of up to 50 beds. And with that, Mayor, staff's on the call as well to answer any questions, and we turn it back over to the City Council.
Thank you, Adam. I'll bring it back to Council. Mendel, you want to start us off?
Mr. Mayor, sure. First of all, I just want to echo what Adam said about staff, specifically Debbie and our chief. They are doing a tremendous job, and I want to personally say thank you to each of them for the patience, the doggedness, the grit, the care which they show in all of this. So thank you for all of that. I personally support the last 3 asks that Adam just talked about. I support on page 7 of the staff report the next steps, the 10 areas that are noted there. So I'm ready to move on those and to support those. I do have a question probably for Debbie or Adam on item or document B, the proposal from LAHSA. It's 6 months old or thereabouts. So has anything changed in terms of the promises or recommendations that are embedded within that?
To date, we have received no information that it's different. In fact, we met recently with the subgroup of all the cities. Dana, who was our main point of contact for Catherine, has moved on. We met Dana's replacement, who's Catherine's homeless liaison, and still continuing to work with them. The supervisor has been a really strong advocate for us and her staff throughout this process. So to date, we believe that is all that's still valid. That comes from the head of LASA in that memo. And as part of this process, as we mentioned, we'll continue to firm up and clarify that proposal and start drafting some MOU language as we move down this path.
Great. And Adam, as I shared with you, I would personally like to see how that board is formed, and if there's any way that either an elected from our group or Debbie or somebody like her from staff can be on that board. I'm just curious as to how it's elected, appointed. As you know, I voiced my doubts about the leadership that LASA has had during the tenure that I've been on the council, and I think that having a position on that board would be good for us to at least have. So maybe in your spare time you can check on that.
Just really quick, Councilmember, I don't have the makeup off the top of my head. I would add that the Mayor Pro Tem from a COG subgroup, along with Debbie and the mayor from the COG board itself, have discussed potential white paper changes to LASA and its funding arrangement and its interaction with cities and focusing more on the subregion. So it does look like there's potentially some changes to come in LASA and some potential other areas for us to be more involved.
Great. That is excellent. My last question is on handout item C, which is the LA County report. It appears to be about five years old. And I guess my question, and I don't know that there's an answer, but I believe that the voters have passed, if not one or two attempts to increase the funding for the county to combat this. And in my view, I'm not sure that the money that has been raised has done much to make a dent in that. So I guess I'm wondering, how valid is this report and the strategies that they are espousing to?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the county came up with a list of strategies it would ask cities in itself to implement. I think as the Measure H monies come in, and then also I think people, not this council, but people hear Triple H, which is the city of Los Angeles, and a capital campaign they have there. And since the city of Los Angeles is also involved in LASA, they sort of get confused on some of those capital areas. What that report served as, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, was that when the county approached the subregion and said, we're willing to put money into this on our end, if you guys can look at some of these approved strategies from a county level and figure out what works best for your agency. So the cities we spoke about tonight and the ways they move forward, those are all approved housing strategies by the county. I think all staff would agree with you that we wish the county had more funding associated with those strategies as cities decided to move forward and implement it. I know Debbie could probably use another $500,000 annually in some of those housing strategies. So appreciate the opportunity to clarify that, and that the document still represents a fair look at what is needed. It does not address, however, as you articulated, the funding behind some of those areas. But this is our attempt to get the county to help fund some of those.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. And I support, as I earlier said, everything that staff is asking for. So thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And echoing thank you to Ms. Lopez for all your grand work and the Chief of Police for keeping us straight. Also want to recognize Gary and Karen's work for keeping this forefront and keeping Glendora on a good direction for helping solve this problem. I think the regional opportunity is terrific. You've all heard me squawk before, but I'll just repeat. I think that people that don't participate in Debbie's services to try to make an improvement in their station in life, but take this as a cruise ship opportunity, I'm not in favor of that. And those tend to be the ones that receive calls for, or create calls for service from the police as well. I hope that maybe this regional opportunity incorporates some cooperative responsibility from the beneficiary or benefiting recipients, that they have a little piece of pie, a piece of skin in the game to cooperate and help support the place they're offered to live while they're working to improve themselves. I'll keep beating that drum, but again, thank you everybody for your great efforts to improve the opportunities that we're trying to create. Thank you. And I do support this.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Adam, I do have one question about your report. I don't know if I misunderstood or you had commented that the SB2 sites that we have currently identified are only zoned to house up to 20 beds at this point. That's correct. All three of the sites are a maximum of 20 beds.
That's correct. And honestly, that was the minimum amount required in most cities at that time when that, from my understanding, when that came out, did just that, without any assessment on how many beds could actually hold. So as part of the steps that we mentioned, we'd have to look at some of the potential environmental impacts. And I know community development's on the call. If you have any specific changes, there's Jeff right now in case we're looking at some of the changes necessary. Jeff, would you mind sort of expanding on some of that?
Yeah, sure. So Adam's correct that back when the law that required that we accommodate emergency shelters came into effect, we adopted only 20 beds total. That's what all we were required to do. So if we wanted to, increase that or modify the zoning or open that up to other areas, we'd have to go through the process to amend the code, and there would be some level of environmental review to do that. So it would be a process, but ultimately it'd be a policy decision on the part of the council.
Well, I guess my question is it possible for any of the three sites that have already been identified to accommodate 50 beds, or is it more likely that we would have to use multiple locations or find a different location what's already been identified?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I'm going to say, I don't know if Adam's looked at, I don't think we've looked at, we haven't looked at any of the sites in terms of accommodating a specific project. I would not be surprised, however, to find that either of the sites on Grand near the freeway could probably accommodate a 50-bed project. Physically they appear to be large enough, and buildings and parking and other things.
And I think as part of it too, council member, is taking a look at, do you have single room occupancy, double room occupancy? How is the room configured? So it does appear based on square footage that either of those sites would be suitable, based on some of the cursory review we've done with the county based on some of their other projects that they have funded to date. But again, part of the direction in number 3 would for us to come back and provide that full level of detail to the county, to the city council as we come back.
The question then with SB2 funding, does making changes there affect the funding that we currently are entitled to in any way?
2 different SB2s.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. Karen?
Thank you. Yes, to answer Councilmember Boyer's question, at that time, the council kind of went kicking and screaming to approve that and did the minimum. So yes, so it wasn't really looked at as to what was possible. It was, what do we have to do to follow the rules? So that's how that happened. Yeah, for much too long, you know, the East San Gabriel Valley has done the push everybody to Pasadena and Pomona. So the idea that we can have an opportunity to do a regional project in the East San Gabriel Valley and try to meet people's needs where they are at is tremendous. So I am very happy that we could go forward with doing some of these things. Another thing related to this, and I know that we can't add it to this action, it would probably have to come back to the council later. But I think another piece of the puzzle, both for this and as we look at our housing element and the bigger picture, is having a conversation about an inclusionary ordinance. Some of the money that we have now, we got from the Arboreta Housing Project when we asked those developers to either have some units set aside or to set aside some money. And I really would like us to make that standard operating procedure for every project. So I don't know when and how we can make that a discussion, but I really think that needs to be a piece of the puzzle for us going forward.
Thank you, Karen. Adam, could you, on page 1407 of the staff report, could you explain that a bit? Because to what Karen just said, there was a balance from some of these different funds we received from different developers. There's a balance of $1.2 million. Could you kind of walk us through where that money has gone and where we stand right now with the funding?
So the funding that's in the fiscal impact of the staff report represents the amount of fund balance left in that fund. But Jeff, do you mind just giving a brief overview of the in lieu or one-time payment that we received and how we arrived at that?
Yeah, so Councilmember Davis is correct. The fund is associated with the Arboreta project, which was I think it's about 100-unit development of the former Rainbird property off of Grand Avenue, where they used to have their corporate headquarters. And what the city did is that it developed a specific plan in coordination with the owner, and then also incorporated a development agreement. And a development agreement, it's not a commonly used tool in Glendora, but it was used in this case. And then through a development agreement, you can negotiate, you know, any type of, you know, remuneration or impact fees or what have you in exchange for granting a land entitlement. And so part of what the city negotiated back in 2006 or 6, I think it was a $2 million in lieu housing payment. So in lieu of providing affordable housing on that site, the city took a fee of $2 million, and that was straight up negotiated. Now, at the time, the city had some pretty ambitious goals, I think, with affordable housing, and we were in the middle of doing the Elwood project also. But since that time, that money has primarily been used to just maintain ongoing housing obligations and cover those costs. And I think that was where some of the money came from to pay for the temporary homeless housing. I think a bit $150,000 or $300,000 out of that fund paid for that. So that's a little bit of background on that fund.
Thank you, Jeff. And on number 2 of the request to continue our hotel and motel operations for the vouchers, is that's coming from, I guess, the fund 285? Is that connected with the $2 million originally?
So two areas of funding there. We did receive some Measure H grant that allows for some housing voucher opportunities in addition to the one-time set-aside funding that we just spoke about. So to date, the one-time set-aside funding, council's made 3 authorizations of up to $150,000. We're not asking for any more money this evening from that set-aside funding that we just discussed. We'll take a look at where we're at with our hotels and motels, and as we transition from a more of a permanent housing, not permanent, but sustained housing during the COVID pandemic to a voucher type program, we'll be utilizing some Measure H funds that we've received through a grant to help fund some of that.
So we to date have only received somewhere around $500,000, give or take, from Measure H. Yes.
But, and I just think that's an important clarification there is cities do not receive a direct allocation for Measure H funding. It's not part of their overall funding strategy. And what makes the proposal so unique from LAHSA and the county is that essentially ongoing operations of an interim housing site, if built in Glendora, would be paid directly by Measure H funding. It would be the way for the residents of Glendora to receive a return on their investment in excess of probably 100% of the allocation.
Yeah, I believe what somewhere around $8 million so far, roughly, we've contributed.
I can't remember the total amount, Mayor, but it's definitely in the millions.
Yes. So on your ask on number 2, roughly how much are you asking for to continue the program?
We're not asking for money, only the ability to amend our current agreements as we transition to more of a voucher type program at this time.
So the funds that we've already allocated is enough to continue this?
For a little while we figure out the voucher type program that we're going to have when we experience those who need shelter for a room or 2 nights.
All right. I wanted to extend on a question that David asked. I'm not quite sure if it got fully answered, but when these folks are in these shelters, will some of the different care providers that we have a partnership with, do they offer services for employment and medical attention and things of that nature?
Debbie, would you mind walking through kind of what something looks like in your world as you go try to provide case providers and services?
So we contract with Union Station Homeless Services, and they do many things. They'll help someone get like an ID. We can have the chief helps me get Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health come out to look at people. Union Station has KEC medical teams come out and look at people who won't leave their motel room or won't leave the site that they're at. There's many avenues that we have of services. It's just if the people are willing to accept them or not, but there's many. We have a mobile COVID testing for homeless people. They'll come out and test and you'll get the results in 3 days. So we have many different services.
So Debbie, you've done an amazing job. I don't know how you've done it, but you've done an amazing job helping all these folks. Can you give a little brief statistic as far as the folks that you've housed or we've housed and you've got them services, how many that you've gotten into long-term care, and what percentage is roughly, not holding you to it, of that have actually accepted some of this help?
Elvia, do you mind going back to the slide where we talk about that exact thing? I'm sure Debbie has the numbers memorized off the top of her head, but.
So overall, we've come across, and this includes the police department too, they're a big part of this. They do a lot of outreach themselves and they do a lot of different things. And, you know, I couldn't do what I do without the council, without the city manager and the chief and the police department. We're all a team and we all work really well together. But so overall, since last April, we've housed 65 different people, but we've had 43 that were approved for Project Room Key and 23 actually moved into Project Room Key. And then we've had 2 different sets of people get into permanent supportive housing. One was a woman with a 2-year-old child, and then we had donations from one of our local churches and we were able to buy her a refrigerator to help her on that. We've had 125 out of the 180 that people we've come into contact actually take some type of service from either the city themselves or from Union Station, take some kind of services. So we get donations from different places, different churches give us like hats, blankets. We work with Shepherd's Pantry for food. There's all different sources, all different people that come together and work together on that. But we've had people go into just like the dependency housing. they didn't do that at first. Some of these people have lived in Glendora for 20 and 30 years that we've actually got to move into a different city that they wouldn't even go into. So they went in for dependency help. Two went into rapid rehousing, which it's spectacular because we haven't seen that in a long time. We've really been able to help people that have been long time homeless in Glendora.
So do you think that moving forward, because we really don't know where the numbers are going to be, particularly with the goal line going through and all that, do you feel that we have enough staff here on hand to complement what you do? Because I know you do an awful lot on your own and people call you on a regular basis on your cell phone, but do you have enough wherewithal and bandwidth to do this moving forward?
I think so. Council just approved through mid-year. We eliminated one position to make up for another kind of social worker type position. And I'm hoping that that person will be able to help me with the grants and other kinds of things. The police department do a tremendous job. They help in a lot of things. Working with Caltrans for some of the encampment removals, all different things. So I really think we have a good team and we all work together to try and help each other. And I hope we communicate well. I think we do.
I'm asking these questions for a reason for folks out there to understand, realize how much effort the city has been put towards this. And also my thanks to Gary and Karen for taking the lead, and Adam as well, trying to take us to that next step. This is not an easy task to do. Then you have the COG that's involved trying to do their own plan and trying to help out and move forward as well. So we have a lot of moving parts. So Adam, let's say hypothetically this gets built, the interim. How is the ongoing funding going to be funded? Where's the funds going to come to the ongoing maintenance from Measure H?
Yeah, so it included in the letter is predicated that the county through Measure H would pay for a provider to come in and actually provide those services, and that would be funded for the long term out of Measure H funding.
So one last question or request is, when we get closer to kind of solidifying a direction we're going to go, do we plan on doing any community events to educate and let everybody know what's going on and let them, ask questions?
So I would add just on a couple of fronts, as we continue to go down this homelessness path in our strategic plan, we've sort of committed to a public outreach campaign that includes the regular updates in our Glendora report, city council meetings. If we make some zoning changes, we'll have public hearings, noticing requirements, and we'll do a lot of that public outreach. Above and beyond that, as we continue to move forward with the other agencies, if the sub-regional approach truly figures itself out and other cities come to the table with shared resources, that we'll continue to have local charrettes, I would assume, to explain the process. But homelessness is definitely on the forefront of the community. It's definitely on our forefront, as staff, and we'll continue with that public push as we move forward.
Okay, so some variation of outreach.
Several different avenues.
All right, thank you for that. Does anyone have any closing remarks or questions?
No, I'd like to make a motion that we approve these items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Elvia?
Thank you. Yes, that's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Davis and a second by Councilmember Thompson. I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Yes.
And Mayor Alawas?
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Elvia. This brings us to item number 11, new business, amendment of authorized position control listening and the clarification and compensation plan for ASFME MOU and GMA MOU, strategic plan number 18 EEDR. I'd like to invite Human Resources Manager Karen Resendez to present the PowerPoint presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm presenting item 11, which is the results of the water study. Next slide, please. As you may recall, we had an agreement with the unions to perform a cost and compensation study for the Water Division of Public Works, which started in the fall of 2019. The study included a survey and interviews with employees, creation of new job classifications, a compensation survey of comparator agencies, and a preliminary recommendation from the consultant on all of those items. When we received those items, the city reviewed the consultant's recommendations and looked at the organizational structure and the MOU provisions which may be impacted, and we finalized the new structure. Following that, we successfully bargained with GMA and AFSCME over the implementation of the results, which impacted salary, the city's classification plan, and several MOU provisions. Next slide, please. This is the new organizational structure for the water division, which resulted out of some of the conversations with the employees and with management of the division as well. We added one additional water division manager, which reduces the span of control by adding the additional position. And it also provides a focus on water operations for the division managers using a cross-functional approach. And what that means is that each division manager, because they're highly certified as chief operators, they'll work together on a daily basis through all of the different operations of production, distribution, and customer service. And they'll cover for each other during absences and also be available during emergencies. This new structure also provides supervisory classifications over production, distribution, and customer service, which were absent before. It also increases the flexibility of staffing between the distribution and customer service areas, as the certifications required for those areas are the same. Next slide, please. These are the new classification and salary ranges. These will replace all of the current classifications with the exception of water division manager. The pay range for water division manager remains the same at GMA range 8. This is these are the salary ranges that would be implemented the pay period following approval by council, which would be March 22nd. And the employees will also receive any MOU negotiated across the board increases that are currently scheduled. Next slide, please. This is a list of the obsolete classifications to be deleted. The incumbents that are currently in these classifications will be allocated to the new classifications listed, making these listed classifications obsolete. So they'll be deleted from the authorized position control and our class and comp plan, as well as the applicable MOUs. Next slide. So some of the MOU changes that resulted from our negotiations with GMA and AFSCME include an increase in water certification pay. Water certification pay is intended to, incentivize employees to get higher level certifications, which will also increase their productivity and their ability to do the job for the city. We increased it from $50 per year for each cert over the minimum required on the job specs to $50 per month. Let's see, I'm sorry. So it increased from $50 per year to $50 per month over 26 pay periods. And the same provision was included in the AFSCME MOU for water utility supervisor and water production supervisor only. We also added welding certification pay, established at $200 a month paid over 26 pay periods for employees designated to perform welding duties. Prior to the classification study, there was a specific classification of senior maintenance worker welder, which received a higher rate of pay than the equivalent senior maintenance worker. Even though the two had otherwise comparable duties, it only had to do with the welding duties. So in combining the classifications and creating less classifications for more flexibility, we established the welding certification for anyone who's required to weld. And we also established that they must have a certification in order to do the welding. Next slide. Some of the other MOU changes that came out of our negotiation sessions have to do with on-call and call-out compensation. On-call and call-out currently exist in the AFSCME MOU. It's called beeper standby and call-out pay. And there were actually 3 articles addressing these items, which we combined into one comprehensive article. It was $25 for weekdays and $30 for weekends, holidays, and now it is $30 per day for non-work hours on work days. So for example, if I work a Monday and I'm on call, I work a 10-hour shift and then I'm only on call for about 12 and a half hours. So it's $30 per day for non-work hours on work days and $60 per day on non-work days, so weekends and holidays. Additionally, we established on-call pay for supervisors using the same amounts and requirements as AFSCME and for GMA employees, and established call-out pay at straight time at the base rate of pay. AFSCME employees are paid overtime at time and a half. As GMA employees are overtime exempt, it would just be straight time at base rate of pay. And this was established to recognize that some overtime exempt employees may be required to return to duty to perform work to ensure that the water system is functioning properly. Next slide. Concerning the financial impact, the implementation of the study will be effective in the next full pay period following approval, which begins March 22nd. Funds have already been included with the water fund for the current fiscal year to implement the study, and then the cost will be factored into future budgets. Next slide. We're requesting that City Council approve the resolution, which amends the authorized position control listing and the city's classification and compensation plan, as well as amends the MOU with AFSCME and the MOU with GMA. I can take any questions if you have questions for me.
Thank you very much, Karen. Wonderful report. Bring it back to council. Mendel?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Karen, thank you. Excellent work, excellent report. Clarity is really good. I think this really speaks well, and I believe that Mr. Schmidt, I was looking at my notes, but I believe that was his last name when he spoke at the public hearing, said it well, that the city has listened, has acted, has been fair, and those are things that often cities and government are not highly thought of doing. And I really appreciated the remarks that he made. It's a reflection, as he said, on the leadership that Adam and our team gives. And I think that it's really important that the people that we have working there are certified. It helps them to have a lot of confidence in the work that they do. The public should be very happy that the people that are taking care of such a precious thing that we all need and want are well trained and equipped to do the tasks which they have. It's a reflection of really the efficiency that the council and Adam directors are wanting to have from everyone that works for us. And so I am thankful that this is being done, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. David?
Yes, I echo many of those. Thank you all. It's great to see that the AFSCME group and the GMA group and all the employees can come together for the benefit of making a standard system that makes sense. I really appreciate the encouragement for the classifications and certifications to help the employees grow their position and promote. So great program there. Clarifying the on-call program is a great success as well. Congratulations to all the departments, and thanks to the team for making this work. I support.
Thank you, David. Gary?
No question, just a great job. This is a long time coming, and I'm glad we're finally in here.
Thank you, Gary. Karen?
No questions. Good job to everybody. And I was going to say I'm ready to call for the vote, but I'm guessing that you're going to have some questions or comments, so I'll wait.
Smart move. Karen, thank you so very much for all the work you've done. I know it was a lot of work. It took a lot of time to do this. I know our folks are happy, and I seem like a broken record saying that our only asset, the real asset that we have is our folks, and not our buildings and our hardware, it's our folks. And I think that I would like to think they're very happy about this. And thanks to you and Adam and the rest of everybody else who made this happen. It's great. It's wonderful. I can't say enough. So with that, I'm sure, Karen, you want to make a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Davis, a second by Councilmember Friedendahl. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
and Mayor Alawas.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Elvia. This brings us to our last item, item number 12, annual general plan progress report and housing element implementation annual progress report. That's a mouthful. I'd like to invite City Planner Mark Carnahan to present the staff report. Mark?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight before you is the annual general plan progress report. Next slide. The report's purpose is to provide an update on the city's progress towards implementing policies and programs identified in the general plan and an update on housing units constructed over a past year. The council is being asked to receive and file the report, as well as authorize staff to file with the state agencies. State law requires that by April 1st of each year, cities shall provide an annual general plan progress report to the legislative body, the State Office of Planning and Research, also known as OPR, the Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD. The purposes of the report is to provide an update on the city's progress towards implementing policies and programs identified in the general plan. The report is also required to include an update on housing units constructed over the past year. State agencies use the annual progress report to identify statewide trends in land use and to analyze how local planning and development activities relate to statewide planning goals and policies. HCD also uses the annual progress reports to track housing information, including the city's progress towards accommodating its fair share of the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, also known as RHNA. The Planning Commission received and filed this report on March 2nd. Next slide. General plans are often referred to as the blueprint for the community, and they serve as the comprehensive long-range plan that provides the framework for future growth and enhancement. These long-term goals, divided across various thematic elements, have multiple tasks with different timelines and milestones. Next slide. The City of Glendora's general plan includes 7 mandatory elements and 2 additional optional elements. The mandatory elements are the land use element, and it designates the proposed general location and distribution of land uses. It includes standards of population density and building intensity. The circulation element represents the city's overall transportation plan. It consists not only of the physical transportation system itself, such as the streets and highways and bicycles and sidewalks, but also the various modes of transportation, such as the cars, buses, trucks, movements of rail, ride sharing and walking, and etc. The housing element identifies and analyzes the existing housing needs for all economic segments of the community, again consisting of the regional fair share allocation of the housing needs established through the regional planning process. The conservation element is to provide for direction regarding the conservation and development of our natural resources within the city, such as our water, energy, solid waste, and stormwater management. The safety element addresses the protection of unreasonable risks, such as the obvious earthquakes, floods, fires, and other hazards. The noise element establishes noise contours and standards that identifies and appraises the noise sources and problems and includes measures to address them. The open space element regulates, obviously, open space for preservation and managed production of natural resources and outdoor recreation. Glendora calls this the open space and recreation element, and it examines the existing open spaces, recreational facilities, strategies and actions to preserve and enhance the amenities within the city. The open space designation in Glendora includes both private and public lands within the foothills and within the South Hills. Two optional elements that are included in the city's general plan are the air quality and the historic preservation elements. This slide here identifies the year in which the city last updated the various general plan elements. As you can see by the dates, our general plan is not very recent, but it is also not very old, considering that most cities' general plans last approximately 20 years. Additionally, the housing element is the process of which the housing element is currently being updated now. And the housing element is the only element of this list that is required to be updated every 7 years by state law. Next slide. The goals and policies of the general plan are implemented by the day-to-day policies of the city, in which we enforce through the zoning ordinance, building code, NPDES regulations, and numerous programs and services that the city administers to serve our residents, such as parks and recreation programs, housing assistance programs, economic development policies, public works programs, and capital facility improvement programs. State agencies use the annual progress report to identify, again, statewide trends in land use, and also to analyze how local planning is in developing activities relating to the state's goals and policies. And again, the importance for the state really is a focus on housing, and the HCD is really using this as a tracker on RENA. And over the years, it has been using this more and more every year. Next slide. The current general Glendora annual progress report covers the accomplishments for the 2020 calendar year. The following are a few notable accomplishments of the general plan elements that had the most activity. Land use is one, and 3 activities were that there were multiple family residential projects. There are 3 of them along Arrow Highway in various stages of review. These projects are in keeping with the goals and intents of the new Arrow Highway specific plan. The city adopted an ordinance amending the zoning code for consistency with state law regarding accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. The updated ADU ordinance further facilitates the permitting processing of ADUs, which are an important housing stock resource in the city, and I would probably say our ever-growing resource as the numbers of those are increasing every year. Next slide. The city staff continued coordination with the successor agency of the Glendora Redevelopment Agency regarding its long-range property management. It had 2 remaining sites left over, the Amelia site and the Parker site. The Planning Commission tonight approved the Parker site's approval for the 8-unit housing project with the 1 commercial building. And the Amelia site was sold to a medical office, our local hospital for future medical office use. And so we are moving towards getting those wrapped up on that front. Next slide. The circulation element for this, where there's three things. One is the city installed tap validator devices in all of our transit vehicles. Additionally, the city began procuring full replacement dial-a-ride vans and new dispatch software through a grant. The city submitted 2 grants to the state's active transportation program for first and last mile improvements on Glendora and Foothill. The total cost of these are around $7 million. The city held a 5-month demonstration on the bike lanes, which you discussed today, this evening as well. Next slide. So the city adopted a policy and thresholds to analyze transportation impacts identified under a CEQA. The policy establishes local standards for analyzing vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, for new development projects. This was a recent law, and so it's going to change the previous analyzing of the level of service, which us planners have been used to doing for most of our career. The new metric is now the VMT. City staff continued to review construction plans for the Metro Goal Line, some of which was discussed this evening as well. Next slide. A little bit more on housing here. The city was awarded $160,000 under SB2 and $150,000 under the Local Early Action Planning Grants Program, or LEAP. Both grants are for updating local planning documents to address California's housing needs. The city was awarded $200,000 grant from the San Gabriel Valley governments that can be used to pay for motel rooms for the homeless. And the city has spent affordable housing funds to house homeless individuals due to COVID. Again, as you guys also touched on tonight. Next slide. The conservation element, the city's water division updated their incentive program to encourage residents to replace their high water use devices and landscaping with high efficiency options. Work was done on several projects aimed at improving the water delivery system. Staff began a review and draft revision of the urban forestry manual, which will update the procedures and maintenance for preserving Glendora's trees. Tree wells were also expanded along major thoroughfares in various locations. The city enhanced planters with drought tolerant plantings as well at the Equestrian Center and the Teen Center. Next slide. So as previously stated, the Housing Elements annual progress report is intended really to show the city's progress towards our RENA numbers and implementing those programs. The state, I do want to apologize for everybody who sees this, all the attachments. The state's report format are all these data tables. There are various standardized data tables that are, I will say, extremely difficult for the general public to understand and to present as a staff member visually. The data tables are really, I would say, intended. I think that, you know, how the state is. I think they intended these tables for their analysts to review, and they didn't have the public in mind when they were preparing them. So if I apologize for the scale and how they presented, we had no control and with them at all. But I want to kind of summarize them. The data tables concluded that there are residential housing units in various stages on development within the pipeline, including 87 housing units, 14 of which were entitled, 27 of which were issued building permits. 46 new housing units received final inspection from the city's Building and Safety Division during the 2020 period. Housing units receiving final inspection in 2020 included 33 single-family detached units, including single-family residences and detached condominiums, and 13 new accessory dwelling units. Next slide. It should be noted that all of the reported and constructed housing was market rate and went towards the above moderate income category. As such, the city has no housing to report to the state that would go towards meeting the city's required RENA numbers for the very low, or moderate income levels. Next slide. As for the next steps, the city council is being asked to receive and file the report this evening, and once we receive that, staff will be authorized to file the reports with the two state agencies to meet the state's April 1st deadline. Next slide. Again, here are the formal recommendations tonight, and I'll be available, and I think Jeff's available as well for any questions if you have any tonight.
Thank you, Mark, for the report. I'll bring it back to council. Mendel?
Mark, you did a fantastic job explaining a very hard and difficult report. It's important, though, to have, and I appreciate the fine work that you do, and frankly, the energy that you have in giving this report. Thankful that it's good, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. David?
Thank you, Mark. Great report. Lots of good information. I have no questions.
Thank you, David. Gary?
No questions. Thanks, Mark.
Karen?
No questions. Thank you to Mark and staff.
Great. Again, Mark, thank you very much for doing this. As Mendel said, it's a tough subject to put out there with the energy, particularly after 10 o'clock at night. So my hat's off to you. Entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second? Anyone have a second?
Second.
Elvia?
Yes, that is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Davis, a second by Councilmember Thompson. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
and Mayor Alawas.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Elvia. This brings us to council staff items. Mendel,
No, everything's good. Thank you.
David,
None, thank you.
Gary,
No, nothing to add. Thanks.
Karen,
Yes, I'd like to bring up what I mentioned earlier and see if I could get a second to bring it back for future discussion about an inclusionary ordinance.
I would second that.
Elvia, roll call vote, please. I guess we don't need that.
You don't need it if it's an agenda item to be
Good,
added.
good.
Thank
good.
you.
I just want to remind everyone that at our next council meeting on the 23rd, we will rotate our mayor and mayor pro tem. It's that time of year again. With that, is anyone from the staff like to comment or make an announcement? No? I'd like to ask our city attorney to report any closed session actions taken during our previously scheduled meeting at 6 p.m. That meeting was adjourned at 6:57 p.m. Bill?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. Council met in closed session as its own labor negotiators to engage in labor negotiations with one unrepresented position. The position is city manager. The city council unanimously directed the city attorney's office to prepare an amendment to the contract of employment with the city manager and to bring the same back at the next council meeting for public consideration and possible action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Bill. We are adjourned at 10:20 p.m. Good night, everyone.
Good night.